My classmates left me to die on the first morning of the zombie apocalypse. 50 years later, I regressed into the same barricaded college fieldhouse to take my revenge 10 seconds before they opened the infected door. The rule was simple. Once that door opened, anyone inside could be bitten, and Delaney Ross was ordering somebody else to risk his life for her conscience. I stopped the guy at the handle and told Delaney, "You want Aaron inside? Open it yourself." She did. Aaron came through infected. Delaney shoved another classmate at him. I kicked her outside and locked the door. Then the class locked me outside too. Beautiful. Same cowards. Better timing. The first time Delaney gave that order, I still believed people meant what they said. Back inside Havenport Technical College, rain hammered the fieldhouse roof. Aaron Pace, one of our classmates, pounded on the barricaded side door. "Please," Aaron yelled through the metal, "let me in." He choked between blows against the glass. Delaney Ross stood beside the barricade in her student council jacket. She represented our cohort, which had convinced her she represented basic morality too. Delaney raised her voice for the whole room. "Aaron is one of us. Open the door. I'll take responsibility." Nobody asked what that responsibility looked like after a bite. A nervous student reached for the handle. I was Jared Solis, another student there, with 2 working arms, no weapon, and no future knowledge. The door cracked open. Aaron lunged through the gap with gray skin and bloody teeth. At the same moment, another infected student rose from behind the bleachers. The second infected student shoved me forward. I caught Aaron's jaw with my left forearm. His teeth sank through my sleeve. Pain hit first, then the fever. By sunset, half of Havenport was screaming. By the next morning, I had cut off that arm before the infection reached my chest. I survived 50 years with one hand, fighting wars and forging weapons from black gold cores inside zombie skulls. Near the end, a mechanic and doctor strapped me into a black gold rig built to return me to the outbreak's first activation. The mechanic gripped my remaining hand. "You get one return, Jared. Make the first choice count." I told him to start it. The device flooded the ruined lab with black gold light. Then Delaney's younger voice came through the noise. "I'll take responsibility. Open the door." I came back standing 10 seconds from the same handle. My left arm was whole again, shaking with memories it had never lived. Delaney looked young, and the fieldhouse floor held no blood. The transfer had worked. The student beside me reached for the handle. I caught his wrist. Delaney snapped, "Jared, let go. Aaron could die out there." I looked at the class rep saint. "And if he's infected?" Delaney lifted her chin. "I told you. I'll take responsibility." "Great." I moved the student away from the door. "Then use your own hand." The room heard me clearly. Delaney's smile tightened. "Stop being a coward. You're volunteering everybody except yourself." I pointed at the handle. "Open it, Delaney." The blonde classmate standing nearest the barricade pulled his hand back. Delaney glanced around for another volunteer. Nobody moved. Delaney could order the room only while it obeyed. It had stopped. Delaney grabbed the handle to save face. The door flew inward. Aaron crashed through, already transformed. His mouth opened on a wet growl. Delaney screamed and grabbed the blonde classmate by the shoulder. Then she shoved him at Aaron. There it was. Her conscience had lasted exactly 1 zombie. I yanked him sideways. Aaron's teeth missed his neck. Delaney tried to retreat behind me. I planted my foot against her hip and kicked hard. She flew through the doorway and hit the rain-slicked concrete outside. Another student drove a screwdriver through Aaron's eye while I slammed the door shut. Delaney scrambled up and grabbed the outer handle. "Jared!" Delaney hammered the glass. "Open this door right now. I'm your representative." I turned the lock. "Represent the parking lot." The room moved before she finished screaming. The blonde classmate shoved a folding table against the entrance. 2 students stacked benches behind it. A girl who had praised Delaney 5 minutes earlier dragged over a weight rack. Delaney shouted every title she had. Nobody traded a throat for any of them. The blonde classmate looked at me, breathing hard. "He saved me." Delaney pushed me first. After he said that, nobody in the room followed Delaney again. The class stopped calling me a coward. They started watching my hands. Then Delaney went quiet outside. I knew silence around zombies meant movement, death, or both. I needed to see the field. "Move the table," I ordered. "I'm checking the grounds." The class obeyed until I stepped outside. Behind me, the door slammed. Then the lock clicked. A student shouted through the glass. "You murdered her! Stay out there!" They had locked the only zombie expert outside and were grating his manners. You know the type. They wanted my answers without my presence. 3 infected students crossed the athletic field toward me. The blonde classmate pressed both palms to the glass. "Jared, run!" I picked up a broken steel chair leg. The first zombie swung at my face. I stepped inside its reach and drove the metal through its temple. The second grabbed my jacket. I turned, hooked its ankle, and smashed its skull against the steps. The third lunged from my blind side. I ducked, rammed the chair leg under its chin, and let its own momentum finish the job. The field house went silent behind me. I knelt over the first corpse and split the softened bone near its crown. My fingers found a pearl-sized green-black stone. The apocalypse had loot drops. Apparently the end of the world needed a side hustle. Black gold was immature that morning, but each core stored heat, light, and the virus's energy. In my first life, mature cores powered blades, shelters, and vehicles. Nobody in that room knew that yet. The class watched me pocket it. Colin Fitch, the blonde classmate Delaney had shoved, stopped pounding on the glass. Another student pulled the barricade tighter even though I was outside. Another zombie rushed me while my hand was inside the skull. I threw the core into my pocket, caught the corpse by its shirt, and drove it into the fieldhouse wall. A crack spread through the glass. The students jumped back. I left without asking them to reopen the door. Colin shouted my name through the glass. He reached for the lock, but 3 classmates grabbed his arms. The same people who had called me a murderer now wanted my help and feared the price of asking. I held up the core so they could see it. "Keep the shelter," I called. "You already chose who belongs inside." Colin stopped fighting them. The rest avoided my eyes. Their barricade still held, but the person with the answers was walking away. Delaney had lost the door. The class had lost the only person who understood the dead. I had the first core. The win exposed one more danger: useful knowledge in public. Half of Havenport had fallen on day 1 in my first life. I had lost an arm and spent 50 years learning what those cores could do. Minutes later, I crossed the campus park because the field house had become a cage full of cowards. My young body hated the pace. 50 years of technique had returned inside muscles that had spent the week sitting through lectures. The first park zombie swung both arms high. I stepped under them and crushed its knee before finishing the skull. The second tried to bite from the ground. I used its body to trip the third. A family hiding inside the equipment shed watched through the slats. The father had one hand on the latch. After my third kill, he pulled his daughter back and left the door closed. Smart man. He had just seen the only useful lesson on campus. I split the 3 skulls and found one more core. 2 corpses had only dark seeds. The material was still forming, so every kill was a gamble. A curtain shifted in the park office. I caught the reflection of a girl ducking away from the window. I never saw her face. Good. Now somebody had watched me harvest cores. More infected students spilled from the dorm road. 10 became 20. A groundskeeper stumbled from behind a bus and added 3 more to the chase. I cut down the first pair, but my grip slipped on the chair leg. My old mind knew 6 ways to clear the lane. My young shoulders could afford one. Future knowledge did not give me future stamina. Very rude apocalypse design, so I ran off campus and cut across the next block. The horde followed every splash and metal strike. A convenience market sat beside a nightclub with its lights still on. The market's steel shutter was descending, leaving a gap barely high enough for a person. One zombie grabbed my backpack 10 feet from safety. I slipped out of the straps, drove an elbow into its jaw, and shoved it into the 2 behind it. The pile bought me 3 seconds. I killed the closest pursuer at the shutter, slid through the opening, and rolled inside. A second corpse reached under before the steel hit the floor. I stamped its wrist until the hand stopped moving. The shutter dropped behind my shoes. A small hand held the remote from behind the counter. I let my knee buckle and groaned like the bite had reached me. The hidden girl rushed out with a first aid box. Kindness moved her before caution did. I stood straight, took the remote from her, and closed my hand around it. She froze. "I'm Sadie Rudd," she blurted. "My dad owns this market." "Jared Solis," I told her. "Keep the counter between us." Sadie was 14, alone, and trying to help an armed stranger during the first hour of the apocalypse. That combination had killed her once already. I raised the shutter 6 inches. Zombie fingers scraped underneath. Sadie backed away. "Rule 1, I told her. You don't approach somebody until you control the exit. A corpse pressed its face against the gap. Sadie reached for a broom. "Better," I told her. "Keep the counter between you and the teeth." She jabbed the broom handle into its eye. The body dropped outside. Her hands shook, but she kept the broom aimed at the gap until I lowered the shutter. I handed back the first aid box. I kept the remote. Sadie frowned at me. "You could have just asked. You would have said no." Sadie hugged the first aid box. "That doesn't make stealing polite." I pocketed the remote. "I'm surviving a zombie apocalypse, Sadie. My customer service score can recover later." She glared, then checked the shutter locks twice. "Good." I tested the back door, counted the windows, and found the stairs to the apartment above. The market had food, water, medicine, cameras, and one entrance I could control. On the security monitor, 2 men in nightclub jackets stood across the alley. One tapped the core on the phone screen, the other pointed at Sadie behind the counter. Then both hurried next door. The cores had caught their attention. Sadie had too. I recognized the nightclub before I recognized the men. In my first life, I had reached this same market after cutting off my infected arm. I was delirious, bleeding through a belt, and ready to bite anybody who came close. Sadie had opened the shutter anyway. She cleaned the stump with shaking hands. Then she gave me her father's last antibiotics and slept beside the stockroom door so I would not wake alone. That kindness saved me when every other door stayed closed. Weeks later, Clint Centipede, Crowder, the nightclub boss next door, brought armed men through that same entrance. Sadie's father, Peter Rudd, had gone missing, and Clint claimed he knew where Peter was. He made her unlock the store. Then he took the food, the medicine, and the keys. I watched from behind the stockroom door, too weak to stand. Sadie still asked him to spare the people outside. Clint laughed at her kindness. He told her good people were useful because they opened doors for bad ones. Then he killed her and left her beside the first aid box she had used on me. I carried that sight for 50 years. Sadie had died because she opened one door too many. This time, she could hate every lesson I gave her. She was going to live. Back in the market, Sadie stood alive beside the counter. Across the alley, the nightclub door opened. Minutes after the nightclub door opened, I was still inside Sadie's market. The two scouts had carried the video of my core harvest next door. I figured armed men would come back for the market within an hour. I started with the harder problem. Sadie still believed helping people made them safe. She set a bowl of noodles in front of me. "You look like you haven't eaten all day." "I haven't." I pushed the bowl back. "You also don't know whether I'm armed, bitten, or lying." Sadie crossed her arms. "You stole my shutter remote. I know you're rude." Fair assessment. I made her keep the counter between us while I checked the back rooms. Then I showed her where to stand if the front shutter failed. Every lesson ended with the same rule: control the exit first. I pretended to rush the counter. Sadie reached for the remote instead of the broom. I took it from her again. "Wrong hand," I told her. "The remote closes steel. The broom annoys teeth." She snatched the remote back. "You enjoy being unbearable. I've had a long morning." Sadie made me repeat the drill. On the second try, the shutter dropped between us before I crossed the tile. Then she pointed the broom through the gap from safety. She hated the rule because it made kindness slower. Good. Slow kindness had a chance to survive. The apartment upstairs still had hot water. I took the first shower I'd had in longer than I cared to admit. My returned body had 2 arms, 0 scars, and the soft stomach of a student who considered stairs a personal attack. I looked down and sighed. First day of the apocalypse, and my abs had already abandoned me. Sadie heard me through the bathroom door. "Are you talking to yourself?" "I'm grieving." She left clothes outside. The clothes belonged to her father. Dark pants, white shirt, formal jacket. I came downstairs dressed for a job interview during the zombie apocalypse. Sadie covered a smile. "It fits. It makes me look like I sell insurance to the undead." Across the alley, Clint Centipede Crowder was already spending that minute badly. The market security camera carried sound from the front entrance. Clint, the nightclub boss next door, stood under his awning with 6 men and a metal bat. He pointed at our shutter. "The shelves are full, the liquor is upstairs, and the kid comes with the building." One of his men laughed. Look, Clint still had time to stop. He used it to call a 14-year-old part of the inventory. Sadie stopped smiling and stepped back from the monitor. She whispered, "He knows my dad." "Where is Peter?" I asked. Sadie looked toward the apartment. "My father left 3 days ago for supplies. He told me to stay here until he came back." 3 days is a failed plan. He'll come back. I hope so. I set the ramen on the counter. Until then, helping the wrong person gets the right person killed. Sadie glanced at Clint on the monitor. "People aren't all bad." "No. Bad people love that sentence." Across the alley, Clint ordered his crew forward. They crossed 10 feet before the horde reached the street. The first zombie hit a man near the curb. 2 more came from behind a stalled car. Clint's crew stopped pretending they owned the block. One gangster fired a pistol into the crowd. The shot dropped 1 corpse and pulled 12 more from the intersection. "Great trade." Another man swung a pipe until a bite opened his shoulder. The crew backed into one another, blocking their own retreat. One man turned toward the nightclub. Clint grabbed him by the collar. "You run, you get nothing." The man tried to pull free. Clint shoved him into the horde. The screaming bought Clint time to climb the nightclub fire escape. His own man had become a stairstep. The nightclub king had 6 men and the survival instincts of wet cardboard. Naturally, he kept the title. Clint crossed the narrow awning toward our second-floor window. A zombie caught his boot. He kicked it loose, jumped, and missed the ledge. His hands caught the metal window grill. Below him, the horde reached up. Sadie ran upstairs. I followed with my ramen in the kettle. Clint hung outside the glass, rain running down his face. "Open the window, I can pay." Sat on the sill and ate 1 bite. Clint stared at me. "Are you insane?" "I'm hungry." His right hand started slipping. I poured boiling water over his left. Clint screamed and kicked at the window. The zombie screamed back. Very supportive crowd. Sadie grabbed my wrist. "Stop! He'll fall!" That's the current attraction. Clint changed tactics fast. "Sadie, sweetheart, your father sent me. Let me in and I'll take you to him." Sadie froze. Her hand stopped on the latch. Peter had been gone 3 days. Clint saw it and smiled through the pain. "Come on, you know me." Looked at Sadie. "Control the exit first. You know where this was going." Peter's name mattered more to her than my warning. She reached for the latch anyway. I could have stopped her. I let the choice land because the next liar might arrive while I was gone. Sadie opened the window. Clint hauled himself inside. One surviving man climbed after him. Another stayed on the awning outside, too scared to enter and too trapped to leave. Clint snatched the shutter remote from Sadie and shoved her behind him. "This market belongs to me now," Clint announced. "The kid works for me. You can leave after you hand over the cores." Sadie had opened one window. Clint had already taken the room, her face drained white. "I set the ramen down. You lasted 4 seconds before proving me right." Clint swung the metal bat. I blocked with my forearm, but my young body folded under the impact. Pain shot through my elbow. His second swing hit my ribs. Something cracked. I threw a can at the nearest light switch. The upstairs room went dark, and one of Clint's men panicked into a shelf. I used the noise to drive my knee into Clint's stomach. He barely moved. The nightclub king had spent years lifting weights on other people's property. My returned body had spent the week lifting textbooks. Terrible matchup. Clint caught my shirt and hurled me over the counter. Clint grinned. "All that zombie killing made you feel special?" He drove a boot into my injured leg and forced me against the wall. One of his men grabbed Sadie's hair and pulled her toward the stairs. Sadie clawed at his wrist. "Jared!" I kicked the man's knee sideways. He dropped Sadie and hit the floor. Clint's bat came down again. I caught it with both hands, twisted, and pulled him close enough to headbutt. His nose burst red. He laughed anyway and rammed me through a shelf. Cans hit the floor. My cracked ribs complained about everyone. Clint was bigger, fresh, and convinced the fight had become simple. He pointed the bat at Sadie. "Watch carefully, kid. This is what happens when you bet on the wrong man." Sadie looked from my cracked ribs to the fire extinguisher on the wall. Clint raised the bat from my skull. Sadie grabbed the extinguisher and swung it into his back. Clint lurched forward. Sadie hit him again. "This is my father's store." There she was. I swept Clint's ankle, took the bat, and drove its handle into his throat. He collapsed, choking. The man near the stairs charged me. I threw the bat into his face and kicked him through the open window. He missed the outer railing and fell into the reaching hands below. Clint groaned behind me. I dragged him to the window by his jacket. Sadie stepped in front of me. "He's beaten. You can't kill him." Clint spat blood and managed to smile. "Listen to the kid. People can change." I slapped him awake enough to focus on the horde below. "Clint threw one of his own men into them 5 minutes ago," I told Sadie. "He changed targets." Clint grabbed the window frame. "Wait, I know where Peter is." Sadie flinched. I searched Clint's face. He watched her reaction, not mine. Another lie? I peeled his fingers from the frame. Clint started begging. Then he threatened me. Then he offered the nightclub. He ran out of offers. I dropped him. Clint hit the awning, rolled off, and landed alive in the horde he had used against his crew. The nightclub king finally met a crowd he could not bully. The last gang member clung to the awning outside. "Let me in! I'm done with him!" I pulled the window shut. He looked at Clint below, chose the parked delivery van, and jumped. His shoes hit the roof. Then he ran across 3 cars and caught a drain pipe on the opposite building. I watched him climb to safety. He would carry the story. Fine. Reputation was cheaper than advertising. Sadie stared down until I closed the curtain. "You murdered him," Sadie whispered. "He might have known where my dad was." "Watched your face and invented the answer." Sadie shook her head. "You don't know that. No predators. He was a cheap one." Sadie picked up the fallen fire extinguisher. Her hands shook around the handle. "You wanted me to hit him. I wanted you to choose before he chose for you." Her voice sharpened. "You think everyone is disposable." That landed harder than the bat. Then her knees folded. I caught her before her head hit the tile. Her skin was burning. Upstairs, I found Peter's blood donor notebook beneath a stack of receipts. The last page had his handwriting and one word underlined twice: leukemia. Medicine bottles, used cotton pads, and the old needle marks on Sadie's arms matched the transfusion dates. Peter's note said the donor had missed an appointment. He had gone downtown for blood and expected the trip to take half a day. 3 days had passed. I found no bite or black veins. Sadie was a sick 14-year-old who had guarded the market alone, while her father kept her alive 1 transfusion at a time. Black gold had rebuilt flesh in my future. Early experiments also killed people. I had 2 cores and no safe way to use either on leukemia. I cooled her fever, rationed her medicine, and listened to the horde scrape the shutter below. Once, Sadie woke and asked whether the back door was locked. I checked it. Clint had taught her faster than I ever wanted. At 3 in the morning, the escaped gangster shouted across the street that Jared Solis had fed Clint to the dead. Windows closed one by one. By breakfast, every occupied window knew my name. 1 gang member had escaped, and the whole block now knew the market belonged to somebody worse than Clint. Breathing hurt my ribs. Clint's kick had swollen my leg. Sadie turned her face away whenever I moved. By sunrise, her fever eased enough for her to open her eyes. She saw the donor notebook in my hand and looked away. "Peter told you to stay here," I said. Sadie nodded. "He said the market was safest. He expected to return." Sadie gripped the blanket. "He will," cut in. "It's been 3 days." Her eyes filled, but she held my stare. "I'm not leaving if he comes back." "You are leaving because he hasn't." Sadie pushed herself upright. Why do you care? Because once, when I had one arm and nothing worth stealing, she had cared first. I kept that answer to myself. You helped me, I told her. I pay debts. Sadie looked toward the shutter. My dad said to wait. Your father made the best choice he had 3 days ago. The clock kept moving. I stood, hid the pain in my ribs, and handed her a backpack. Pack medicine, water, and anything you can carry. Sadie moved slowly, but she moved. She put the donor notebook inside first. Then she looped the shutter remote around her neck and chose a short kitchen knife instead of the broom. When she reached the stairs, she stopped. If we find someone outside, do I leave them? You check the exit, you check their hands, then you choose. Sadie nodded once. She still wanted to help. Now she checked first. She gripped the backpack straps. Where are we going? To find Peter. An hour after we packed, a mechanic named Otto Briggs solved our transportation problem by driving through the front wall. The military-style truck crushed the shutter, folded 2 shelves, and stopped with its bumper inside Sadie's market. A round man in a mechanic's coveralls climbed out holding an empty snack bag. Otto owned a repair shop, drove for a living, and had the soul of a car goblin. At that moment, he was also the thief who had murdered our best wall. Otto tapped the name patch on his coveralls. Otto Briggs, mechanic, driver, innocent motorist, you know the type. He had destroyed a building and wanted credit for breaking. Then he looked at me, looked at Sadie, and raised both hands. Before anybody gets dramatic, I was avoiding zombies. Sadie pointed at the wrecked entrance. You drove through my store. Otto tapped the hood. The brakes are sensitive. Sadie stared at the missing wall. You hit a building. Otto spread his hands. It came out of nowhere. Honestly, I don't know what he thought would happen next. Otto reached for a box of canned food. I put the broken chair leg against his throat. He stopped shopping. Sadie stepped beside me with the shutter remote around her neck. Your truck can pay for the damage. Otto clutched his chest. That truck is a classic. Sadie looked at the missing wall. So was the store. Beautiful. Sadie had learned sarcasm and asset seizure. The crash had pulled the horde toward us. Staying meant defending a hole we could no longer close. I took Otto's keys. You're driving, I told him. The truck belongs to Sadie until her father is safe. Otto blinked. That sounds legally questionable. So did the wall. We loaded medicine, water, food, and my 2 cores before the first zombie reached the sidewalk. A corpse climbed through the hole Otto had made. Sadie dropped behind the counter and pulled the remote by reflex, but the shutter lay folded beneath the truck. I cut the zombie's hand off with a shelf bracket and drove it backward into the next 2. Drive, I ordered. Otto looked at the broken display rack scraping his bumper. That paint was original. Sadie climbed into the cab. The wall was original. Otto mourned the shelves longer than the people outside. Then he started the engine and grinned. The truck launched down the block hard enough to throw me against the door. Otto swerved around one wreck, climbed the curb around another, and clipped 3 zombies with the armored fender. Otto shouted, Did you see that? Saw you miss the road. Otto grinned and tapped the wheel. This thing handles like a dream. I grabbed the dash. It handles like you're trying to kill us. Sadie tightened her seatbelt. My father is east. Can we survive in that direction? Otto straightened the wheel. For 6 whole seconds, he drove like an adult. At the next intersection, Otto reached for a bag of chips and hit the horn with his elbow. Every corpse beneath the train tracks turned toward us. Sadie stared at him. Otto put the chips down. Nerves. The truck bounced over a curb, cleared the new crowd, and lost one side mirror. Otto yelled louder about the mirror than the zombies. The vehicle funeral tradition had officially begun. Then the truck rolled to a stop beside a park full of undead. Otto slapped the dashboard. Out of fuel. The gauge showed empty. The engine kept running. 20 zombies turned toward the noise. I found a machete beneath a coil of tow cable and climbed out. Ordinary steel would fail after the dead evolved. That morning, it still cut cleanly. Sadie caught my sleeve. Her fingers were cold again. You're hurt! So were they. Cut the first zombie off the hood, pinned the second against the door, and kicked its body into a third. I cut a lane to an abandoned car and pointed Otto toward it. Find fuel. Otto grabbed a siphon hose. Outside? No. Ask the zombies politely. Corpse caught his ankle beneath the car before he reached the fuel door. Otto kicked, lost the hose, and protected the empty fuel can with both arms. I chopped through the wrist and split the zombie's skull while Otto was still hugging the can. You saved the gas first, I told him. Otto checked the can for dents. Priorities. The green-black core sat inside. Your turn, I told him. I'm the driver. You're the collector. Otto hugged the fuel can tighter. I did not agree to that promotion. Neither did the store. He wrapped his hands in plastic bags, reached into the skull, and pulled the core free while still holding the can. Sadie lowered the window 2 inches. The bone is soft near the top. Otto stared at her. Why do you know that? Sadie pointed at me. Bad morning. Otto studied the glow. Is this worth money? More than the truck. He dropped the bags and started checking the next corpse with bare hands. Greed. Nature's fastest training montage. I finished the remaining zombies while Otto worked down the row. By the sixth usable core, he was polishing one on his sleeve. The sealed fuel can still sat beside his boot, untouched, and the dashboard gauge had climbed to half a tank. I tapped the gauge. The needle held. You stranded a sick kid beside a horde because you were scared. Otto lifted both hands. I was managing risk. You were lying with a dashboard witness. He offered me the cleanest core. Peace offering? Sadie's breathing changed before I answered. I climbed into the truck and found her shivering beneath her jacket. Her fever was coming back. I gave her medicine, took Otto's core, and pointed at the road. Drive. The direct road toward Peter was worse than the park. A pileup blocked all 6 lanes beneath the overpass. Zombies filled the gaps between crushed cars. Sadie studied the map with trembling hands. Can we go around? Otto rubbed his jaw. Across the river, I knew a blacksmith with a workshop near the industrial warehouses. You want a repair shop, I said. Why do you need a blacksmith? My shop fixes engines. His forge fixes problems that chase engines. The detour cost us hours, but the direct route had become a wall of teeth, so we crossed the river. By late afternoon, we reached the forge district. The streets were narrower, the warehouses taller, and every metal impact echoed between buildings. Sadie tried to stay in the truck. Then she saw Otto collecting cores while I cleared the first alley. She climbed out with a pair of kitchen tongs. I blocked her path. Inside, Sadie lifted the tongs. We need more cores. I can help without fighting. Her fever had made her pale. Her voice stayed steady. I started to order her back. Sadie tightened her grip on the tongs. You leave me in the truck. I can't help find my dad. Stay behind Otto, I told her. If he runs, trip him. Otto looked offended. Why am I the standard for cowardice? Consistency. We cleared the street in short bursts. I killed. Otto dragged bodies. Sadie extracted cores from the safe side and kept count. The team was ugly, loud, and effective. Men watched us from a warehouse balcony across the district. I saw a rifle scope catch the sun, then disappear. I learned the exact order later from a radio taken off one of those men. Wait for dark. Break the driver's legs. Take the girl in the forge. The same radio chatter blamed the gangster who had escaped Clint's window for spreading my name. Ronan Slade controlled the warehouse district. Before his men touched anything, he called our truck, our cores, and the forge his property. You know the type. He had already started bragging about property he didn't own. At the end of the block, Otto stopped before a brick workshop with fresh coal dust under the door. The blacksmith was gone. His forge was still warm. Tools covered the walls. Finished axes and swords filled 2 racks. Any survivor would have called it a jackpot. I called it temporary. In my first future, ordinary blades began failing within a week. Zombie bone hardened, muscle thickened. A good sword became an expensive spoon. I placed the harvested cores beside the furnace. Otto's eyes widened. You can make something better? Can make something nobody alive knows how to build yet. I melted the core material into the steel while Otto worked the bellows. Sadie kept the door watched and passed me tools before I asked. The shop's binder had hardened inside its jar. Sadie handed me the strawberry drink from her backpack. Otto stared as I poured a little into the mix. The sugar burns clean enough to hold the core dust, I told him. Otto shook his head. You're making a super weapon with children's juice. The apocalypse has a budget. I cut my palm and pressed blood into the unfinished grip. Black gold reacted to living tissue. The blood signature told the weapon who could command its weight and energy. The metal locked around the pattern. Green light ran from the grip to the mechanical edge. The furnace flame bent toward it and every loose core on the table vibrated. The handle burned my cut palm. Blood attunement gave control, but the first bond always took heat and strength from the user. My knees almost dipped. I lifted the sword from the anvil before Otto noticed. The blade hummed. Otto reached for it. Careful, I warned. He grabbed the handle with both hands and tried to lift. The sword barely moved. Otto's face turned red. How heavy is this thing? For you? Embarrassingly. Took it with one hand. The edge unfolded and a green line stretched along the steel. Sadie smiled for the first time since leaving the market. That was exactly when Ronan's men entered through the back. A long-haired attacker wrapped one arm around Sadie and pressed a knife beside her face. 2 more gunmen aimed at Otto. The 4th man looked at my sword. Put it down. The girl comes with us. The sword had been alive for 10 seconds. It already had a hostage problem. I lowered the point without releasing the grip. The gunman smiled. Smart! He stepped between me and the man holding Sadie. I turned my bleeding palm against the handle. The sword answered. A green arc crossed the workshop. It cut the gunman clean through the torso and split the loading ramp behind him. His threat ended before his body reached the floor. Otto's mouth opened. The surviving kidnappers folded immediately. The long-haired man dragged Sadie through the back door while the others fired wild shots and ran for their truck. I launched a second arc. It carved through the pavement beside them and overturned one gunman. The blast drew every fast zombie in the district. They flooded the alley between me and the fleeing truck. I tossed Otto our keys. Follow Sadie. Otto looked from the horde to me. What about you? Making a lane. He ran. Otto drove after the kidnappers while I met the horde at the workshop gate. His voice cracked through the truck radio. Black pickup heading north. Sadie is in the back. 3 men, maybe 4. Stay on them, I answered. Don't ram the hostage. That was one time. You hit a store an hour ago. The sword cut through bodies and steel with the same cold ease. Every arc drained heat from the grip into my injured arm. By the 5th strike, my fingers were numb. A city bus blocked the shortest route to Ronan's warehouse. I drove the blade down. The bus split through the middle and rolled apart far enough for me to pass. 2 gunmen fired from behind a concrete barrier. I cut the barrier and the men behind it with one horizontal arc. A bottle of burning fuel spun from the roof. I saw the throw, stepped under the path, and let it burst behind me. Then rifle fire chewed the pavement around my boots. The sword could cut bullets from one direction. The shooters used 3. I dropped behind the split bus and waited for their magazines to change. Then I crossed the open yard before they realized I had counted the shots. Otto's truck waited outside the main warehouse with one door hanging open. He stood behind it, pale and breathing hard. I lost them inside, Otto admitted. There are too many guns. You stayed. Otto swallowed. You have the keys. There was the joke. He still came inside. Inside Ronan's warehouse, armed men lined the catwalks and loading floor. A generator roared beside stacked crates. Every gun pointed toward the center. Sadie stood on the upper walkway with Ronan's Slade behind her. The warehouse emperor wore a clean coat and held a pistol against her head. He had built a throne out of stolen supplies and called it management. Jared Soulless, Ronan called down. Drop the sword and come inside. We can negotiate. Sadie met my eyes and stayed still. Good. She understood the gun mattered more than the insult. A frontal strike would kill her before the arc reached the rail. I lowered the sword. Otto grabbed my sleeve. Tell me this is a trick. It's a meeting. Otto glanced at the catwalks. With every gun he owns, I stepped forward. I asked for the full audience. Otto looked ready to leave. Then, he stepped through the warehouse door beside me. Ronan wanted every gunman in the warehouse watching me surrender. I wanted the same audience. One of us had badly misunderstood who the weapon belonged to. Inside Ronan's warehouse, every armed man stayed because the warehouse emperor had ordered them to watch my surrender. Sadie stood on the upper catwalk with Ronan's pistol against her head. Otto stood beside me on the loading floor. He tried very hard to look like he had not followed me into a firing squad. Ronan pointed at my sword. Slide it over. I laid the blade on the concrete and pushed it toward him. The nearest gunman grabbed the handle with both hands. The sword did not move. He planted one boot beside it and pulled until his face went red. Another man joined him. Together, they managed to scrape the tip half an inch. Otto leaned near my shoulder. Big speech! Tiny ownership rights! Ronan heard him. Good. Arrogant men made better mistakes when somebody laughed. Ronan descended from the catwalk while one gunman kept Sadie covered. He removed his coat, rolled his shoulders, and grabbed the sword himself. Nothing. The whole gang watched their emperor strain until his face tightened. The sword stayed on the floor. Ronan released the handle and aimed his pistol at Otto. Explain. The weapon recognizes my blood, I told him. Everybody else gets dead weight. Ronan's eyes shifted toward my cut palm. Greed replaced embarrassment almost immediately. Man, the recovery speed on that ego was impressive. You built it from those stones? Ronan asked. I took one black gold core from my pocket and held it up. You call them stones because you don't know what they become. Every gun in the warehouse stayed trained on me. Every eye moved to the core. That was the audience I needed. Ronan stepped closer. What do they become? Kept my eyes on Sadie. I know what this warehouse becomes. It becomes the center of the Iron Serpent Syndicate. Ronan's smile vanished. I kept my voice level. You chained survivors to work crews. You sold food back to starving families. Your men wore that snake emblem while the city learned to fear your name. A gunman glanced toward the painted serpent on Ronan's office door. Ronan stared at me. Who told you that name? I answered. Nobody alive yet. That answer kept him greedy and confused for 3 more seconds. I pointed at the roaring generator beside the stacked crates. Black gold stores energy. Put one core into the right machine, and it can power more than this entire warehouse. Ronan looked from the core to the generator. I had his attention where I needed it. He motioned toward Sadie. Show me. She stays alive while I'm entertained. I walked to the generator with 6 rifles tracking my back. Otto remained near the stairs beneath Sadie. The generator's housing had an exposed maintenance port. I pressed the core against the copper contact and fed it one pulse through my blood-bound sword. The lights burned green. Every bulb in the warehouse flared twice as bright. The generator screamed. Ronan's men lowered their weapons just enough to stare. Ronan smiled again. Do it with 10 cores. Naturally, the warehouse emperor saw one miracle and immediately ordered a larger one. I pushed the core deeper. The generator overloaded. Darkness swallowed the warehouse. Ronan fired first. His muzzle flash showed me exactly where he stood. I called the sword with my blood. The handle tore free from the men around it and slammed into my palm. One green arc crossed the loading floor. 3 rifles fell silent. A second muzzle flashed from the catwalk. I cut the railing beneath it. The gunman holding Sadie lost his footing. Otto charged up the stairs, drove his shoulder into the man, and caught Sadie before she hit the lower landing. The fever and the kidnapping had drained her. The drop finished the job. She went limp against Otto's chest. "Keep her down," I ordered. Otto covered Sadie with his coat and crouched behind the steel stairs. Ronan kept shooting at every sound. One round struck his own wounded lackey near the generator. The man screamed Ronan's name. Ronan answered by firing again. That was his leadership model. Very efficient. Everyone became disposable at the same speed. I moved between the muzzle flashes. One gunman fired from behind a crate. I split the crate and the weapon. 2 men rushed the exit. I cut the chain above the rolling door, and the steel panel dropped in front of them. Ronan tried to climb back toward Sadie. I stepped into the green light from my blade. He stopped. "You took Sadie because you wanted my weapon and the cores," I told him. Ronan lifted his empty pistol like the gesture still carried authority. I drove the sword through the railing beside his head and pinned his coat to the steel. His confidence lasted until he saw the blade pinning his coat beside his head. "You could work for me," Ronan offered. "Half the district. Your own men," I told him. "You don't have a district." I pulled the blade sideways through Ronan's chest. He dropped beneath the painted serpent on his office door. The remaining gunmen folded fast. A few begged. 2 tried to trade the stockpile. 1 reached for Sadie, so I cut him down first. When the emergency lights flickered on, Ronan lay under his own emblem. Every gunman who had aimed at us lay dead around him. The Iron Serpent Syndicate ended in that warehouse before it reached the city. Otto looked over the railing, then looked away. "I'm going to assume the darkness improved the decor." "Keep assuming." Sadie stayed unconscious. "I preferred it that way." A bruised woman stepped from a locked office near Ronan's quarters and pointed toward a reinforced door behind the loading bay. "They kept food, medicine, fuel, and guns in there," the captive told me. "I have the key." The door held the stockpile. I took a compact handgun and its limited ammunition while Otto loaded food, medicine, and fuel into the truck. The sword handled crowds. A bullet handled one fragile target across a room. When I turned back, the woman had taken Ronan's spare coat and a service key. She slipped into the storm before I could ask where she was going. The loading bay camera and a surviving campus feed showed the next disaster later. The first image was a dropped core glowing beside Ronan's wounded lackey. Ronan's bullet had opened his side. He crawled to the core, remembered my demonstration, and swallowed it. His spine bowed. Black veins climbed his neck, his fingers thickened and cracked the concrete. He smashed through a service exit before the camera failed. The lackey was Maddox Bale. I learned his name when he found us the next morning, already carrying the first human bill from my little sales pitch. The campus feed caught Maddox beneath a bus shelter. A looter had cornered Delaney Ross with a knife. Maddox hit the man once. He never got up. Delaney saw the spikes, the blood, and the strength. Maddox waited for her to recoil. She stepped closer, touched his chest, and called him powerful. Maddox gave her my name, my direction, and the truth about the core. Delaney gave him a target. "Kill Jared," she told him. "Do that and you can stay with me. Nobody will treat you like a monster again." Maddox agreed before she finished. Toxic approval. Cheapest leash in the apocalypse. That night, Otto drove our truck through the storm across Havenport. A section of metal roofing tore loose above the street and crashed onto the cab. The roof folded until Otto's head nearly met the steering wheel. He slammed the brakes. "My truck! You stole it!" I formed a bond. I climbed onto the hood, cut away the crushed roof, and kicked the metal into the street. Rain hit all 3 seats. Otto stared upward. "You made it worse." I made it a convertible. The vehicle funeral continued in open air. By morning, our roofless truck reached the old campus road. A group of students sprinted from a horde near the athletic field. Colin Fitch, the blonde classmate Delaney had shoved at Aaron, led them toward us. He saw me behind the sword and shouted, "Jared, help!" I cleared the first 5 zombies with 2 arcs. Otto used the truck to crush the next line. The remaining dead scattered around the drainage wall, and I finished them before my arm went numb. The classmates crowded the truck. One student reached for our food. "Take us with you." "No free rides," I told him. His hand stopped. Colin looked at the corpses. "What do you want?" I pointed at the bodies. "Every core in those skulls." The class stared at the bodies. I opened one skull and handed Colin the first green-black stone. "Collect enough, and you earn food and transport." A student gagged. "You want us to touch that?" I handed him a plastic bag. "You locked me outside with them. Consider this an internship." Otto passed out plastic bags like a completely unqualified supervisor. For the next hour, the classmates who had abandoned me dug through skulls while Sadie counted the cores from the truck. Disgust became hunger. Hunger became work. I paid them with food from Ronan's stockpile and loaded the weakest into the truck bed. The bargain was ugly, clear, and completed, their bags filled with cores. I stopped listening to their opinions. Then Maddox landed on the hood. The truck's suspension dropped under his weight. Spikes covered his shoulders. His eyes fixed on Delaney standing behind him in the road. The class rep Saint had survived. Her smile had not improved. Delaney pointed at me. "He did this to you, Maddox." Maddox ripped the passenger door away and swung it at my head. I blocked with the sword. The impact threw me across the pavement. Before he could follow, a burning figure dropped from the roof of a campus building. The unknown fire user hit Maddox hard enough to drive him through the truck's hood. Delaney's revenge scene had lasted 4 seconds before a stranger stole it. Tragic. The fire user hit Maddox first. Then my sword flared green, and the creature's head snapped toward me. Flames rolled toward us. I grabbed Sadie and pulled her behind the truck. The fire crossed the seats, caught the fuel cans, and turned our supplies into a wall of heat. Otto made a sound usually reserved for funerals and expensive repairs. "Leave it," I ordered. We ran through the nearest garage because the repair bays offered cover and one useful weakness: water lines crossed the ceiling. Behind us, Maddox shoved the burning hood away. "That thing ate a core too." The fire user's voice scraped through the smoke. "They forced it down my throat." Maddox pointed toward me. "He knows what happened to us." Delaney stepped between the two mutants before they resumed fighting. "Then bring him alive. Tear apart anybody else." Maddox lifted his head and sniffed the rain. "I can track his blood." My newest enemy came with scent detection. The apocalypse was speedrunning bad upgrades. Inside the garage, Otto pushed Sadie behind a hydraulic lift. I checked the handgun from Ronan's armory. Few rounds. One clean purpose. Maddox smashed through the rolling door. The fire user came through the sidewall in a burst of heat. I fired past Maddox and hit Delaney in the shoulder. She dropped. Maddox turned toward her on instinct. That broke his charge. I cut across his chest and kicked him into a tool cart. The blade opened armor-like skin, but the strike barely slowed him. The fire user raised both arms. Heat rolled across the ceiling toward the water main. Sadie saw the opening before Otto did. She pulled a hatchet from the emergency cabinet and threw it. The blade struck the fire user's raised forearm. The flames broke for 1 second. I jumped onto the lift, drove my sword through the water pipe, and ripped it open. A pressurized sheet of water crashed across the garage. The fire user folded under the flood. Steam filled the repair bay. Otto rammed a rolling tool chest into Maddox's knees. Maddox stumbled, and I hit him with a short energy arc at point-blank range. He crashed through the broken door beside Delaney. The fire user crawled from the water with smoke rising from soaked skin. I raised the sword again. The creature backed into the rain. Maddox grabbed Delaney and followed. Both ability users left wounded. Delaney left bleeding. We left with no vehicle, no food, and barely enough strength to stand. My knees hit the garage floor after the door closed. Otto caught the sword before it struck concrete. Sadie pressed both hands against my shoulder and checked the bullet wound. Was Delaney's, not mine. I gave them the rule from 50 years of survivor records. Most humans who swallow a core become zombies or die. Around 1 in 10,000 becomes an ability user. Fewer keep enough reason to speak. Otto looked toward the smoking doorway. "We met 2 in 1 morning. 2 ability users," I told him. "Delaney just knows how to point Maddox." Even 2 was wrong. These mutations had appeared weeks before the future I remembered. The timeline was accelerating. Sadie wiped rain from her face. "My dad has a friend in the mountains, Abram Heller. He built a fortified lab before the outbreak." I pushed myself upright. We had lost the truck, the stockpile, and the city route to Peter. A fortified lab was the only move left, so we walked toward the mountain before the next impossible thing learned our scent. With our vehicle burning behind us, Sadie led Otto and me toward her father's old friend in the mountains. Abram Heller owned Heller Ridge Lab, a fortified research property above Havenport. Peter had trusted him enough to mention the place. That was more trust than the city had earned lately. We walked through rain because every road was blocked, and Maddox could track my blood. The shortest street ended beneath a collapsed overpass. The next route ran through waist-deep runoff and abandoned cars. Every detour pushed Sadie farther while the fever weakened her. 4 zombies came out of a pharmacy doorway. I cut the first and kicked the second under a car. The current carried the last 2 into a guardrail, where I finished them. The sword still worked. My arm did not appreciate the reminder. Otto carried the packs we had saved. When Sadie's fever made her stumble, he put her arm over his shoulder without making a joke. "Good choice!" Some moments did not need Otto's mouth. Sadie kept pointing uphill. Peter had once described a service tunnel beneath Abram's property. It was the only road the flood had not buried completely. A traffic camera below the ridge recorded what Delaney's group did while we climbed. I watched the footage after we reached the lab. Maddox sheltered beneath an overpass with Delaney and the unknown fire user. Rain steamed off the creature's skin. Maddox emptied 7 cores onto the concrete beside Delaney. "Eat one," he told her. "You'll heal." The fire user backed away. "1 core did this to me. I'm not taking another." Delaney's shoulder still bled from my bullet. She looked at the 7 cores, then at the 2 monsters waiting for her decision. She swallowed the first. Pain folded her against the wall. She swallowed the second before the shaking stopped. By the 7th, black lines covered her throat. Maddox reached for her, but Delaney slacked his hand away and forced herself upright. Her body stayed human. Outside the overpass, 3 wandering zombies stopped at the same time. Their heads turned toward her. Delaney smiled through bloody teeth. She named the arrangement with 1 sentence. "We hunt together now. Jared comes back alive." The fire user refused another core. Maddox kept watching Delaney for approval. She had given both of them my name. That ugly little alliance had a mission. At the flooded tunnel below the mountain, Otto pushed Sadie across on a loose maintenance panel. I walked beside them in chest-deep water. The tunnel lights were dead. Rainwater poured down the ramp behind us. Cars sat underwater with doors open and seatbelts waving through the dark. A zombie rose between 2 roofs. I drove the sword through its skull and shoved the body away from Sadie's raft. A second grabbed my ankle beneath the surface. I cut downward, but the arc flickered. My blood bond had drained too much heat and strength since the warehouse. Otto reached back with 1 hand. "Jared, move! I'm moving! You're doing it like an old man." He had no idea how accurate that was. We reached the deepest section. The water climbed to my chin. Sadie looked over the panel. "Take my hand. Stay centered." The next step found no floor. Water closed over my head. My exhausted body stopped listening. Under the water, my mind snapped back years into my first future, to a flooded transit station where Delaney had caught me. By then, Delaney worked for a regime hunting my resistance mechanics. We built weapons for settlements that refused to become property. Delaney pulled my head above the water. "Where is the mechanic's cell?" Behind her, armed men waited beside crates of stolen black gold. Her question was about the workshop address. I coughed and gave her nothing. She smiled at the men watching, then pushed me under again. My 1 arm struck the concrete. The old stump opened against the edge. Delaney lifted me long enough to repeat the question. "Give me the location, Jared." I spat water at her shoes. She held me under until the tunnel lights blurred away. Then Otto's hand caught my collar. He dragged my face above the flood while Sadie screamed my name. I remember the concrete ramp. I remember Otto swearing at my weight. Then headlights cut through the rain from above. Abram's cameras had seen us collapse below his property. He drove a reinforced utility vehicle into the tunnel, pulled all 3 of us out, and carried us through the mountain gate. Hours later, I woke inside the lab. Sadie slept in a chair with her head against my leg. Otto sat nearby, wrapped in 3 blankets and stealing crackers from a medical cabinet. An older man stood over my sword with both hands on the handle. He lifted it 2 inches, then it dragged him toward the floor. I caught the blade before it crushed his foot. The older man straightened and adjusted his glasses. I was testing the balance. "This is Abram Heller," Otto told me. "He owns the mountain and lies about gravity." Abram pointed at Otto. "He ate 6 emergency rations before asking my name." Peter's old friend looked ridiculous in a robe, work boots, and welding gloves. I still recognized him. In my first future, Abram Heller became the researcher who defined black gold science. Every serious mechanic had studied his work. Right now, he was an eccentric prepper who had not written those future papers yet. Abram offered a hand. "Professor Heller, which university?" I asked. Abram lowered his hand. "Professor sounds better than independent researcher." Every backup system in the building showed how long the self-appointed professor had prepared for this. Honestly, respect. Abram pointed at the green line inside my sword. "You built that." "I did." Abram held out his hand. "Give it to me." I pulled the blade closer. "No!" He leaned toward the grip. "Let me dismantle it." I moved the edge away from his fingers. "Hello." Abram looked offended. "Then why did I rescue you?" I answered. "Because Sadie is Peter's daughter." Sadie stirred at her father's name. I kept my voice low. "Give us shelter and your workshop. I'll bring you a live zombie and show you how black gold behaves inside a living host." Abram's irritation disappeared. Experts got greedy too. Abram just wore cleaner shoes. "Deal," Abram answered. Heller Ridge Lab became our base before lunch. Otto proved what Abram had stocked by opening 3 doors he had been told not to touch. He found food, fuel controls, and a vehicle bay. By the 3rd door, he had forgotten the first 2 existed. Otto stared through the glass wall above the workshop. "Is this a cyber cafe with a helipad?" Abram snatched the fuel inventory from his hand. "Touch 1 more cabinet and I charge rent. I'm a guest. You're an infestation with pockets." The car goblin and the self-appointed professor disliked each other immediately. That was probably why they worked. I spread our remaining cores across the machine shop bench. The storm hit us from Delaney and gave me a deadline. In my first future, the dead hardened and accelerated weeks later. This timeline had already produced ability users. "We build before the weather clears," I told Otto. He reached for a metal plate. I pricked his finger with a sterile needle instead. Otto jerked back. "A warning would be friendly," I told him. "Friendship would slow the surprise." I collected his blood on 2 unfinished grips. The attunement would let him control weapons that normal muscles could barely lift. Then I returned to the armor frame on the bench. One surviving Kappa's camera still carried sound from the fieldhouse. On the monitor, Colin Fitch sat beside the barricade with the classmates who had locked me outside. Their food was gone. A purple storm turned the windows bright enough to show every hungry face. Colin reached inside his jacket and revealed 3 hidden cores, a student whispered. Those monsters on the road ate these. Colin closed his fist around one. Maybe that's why they became strong. Nobody stopped him. Nobody volunteered first either. The class had watched me turn cores into power. Now starvation had made the gamble look reasonable. Abram muted the feed. Your classmates seemed gifted. Told him, they locked me outside. Abram nodded. Gifted was generous. Several days into the storm, Sadie found Peter on the east camera. She called us so sharply that Otto dropped a wrench. On screen, Peter Rudd moved inside a crowd of zombies. He wore a torn raincoat and had covered himself in dark strips of infected flesh. Sadie pressed both hands to the monitor. Quid? Peter moved slowly between the corpses. One zombie bumped his shoulder. He froze, let the dead body sway against him, and kept his hands low until it wandered past. Another turned toward him, sniffed, then looked away. Abram leaned closer. The entrails are masking his human scent. It won't fool anything with better senses, but it's keeping this crowd calm. Peter was alive. He was also 3 miles from the ridge with a purple storm rotating over the eastern road. Sadie grabbed my sleeve. We have to get him now. I looked at the unfinished armor behind me. One arm worked, the spine did not. If I left, the lab would face the coming mutation with half a machine. I'm staying, I told her. Sadie's face tightened. I pointed at Otto. He's going. Otto stopped smiling. Then he stood straighter. I pressed his blood-marked grip into a short mechanical blade. The metal woke green under his hand. His second weapon looked like a heavy pistol. It fired condensed core energy and recharged between shots. Otto aimed it at a target outside the workshop and squeezed once. A green blast punched through the steel plate and the concrete wall behind it. Abram stared at the hole. That was load-bearing. Otto stared at the gun. I love science. The light on the weapon went dark. One shot, then recharge, I warned. The blade drains you too. Use either like a toy and Peter gets a dead rescuer. Otto climbed into Abram's reinforced utility car with the blade, gun, and more confidence than his body could support. He cleared the first roadblock with 1 shot. The weapon went dark while 3 more corpses climbed over the wreckage. Otto swore, drove straight at them, and fired only after the charge light returned. The second blast opened the road. He used the blade on the next 6 zombies and learned the cost when his right arm started shaking. I feel fantastic, Otto announced through clenched teeth. You're lying to a radio without a dashboard witness, I told him. He switched hands and kept driving. Otto shouted over the radio. I may be invincible. The purple tornado dropped across the road ahead. Debris lifted from the pavement. A delivery truck rolled onto its side and vanished into the spinning rain. Otto hit the brakes. His invincibility had lasted 1 intersection. New personal record! I can't reach Peter, Otto admitted. Come back alive, I ordered. Bring value if you see it. On the return route, 1 intact zombie became trapped inside a collapsed bus shelter. It still had both legs, both arms, and enough teeth to make Abram happy. Terrible standards, but useful. Otto looped a tow cable around its torso and dragged it into the utility car's cargo cage. He locked the divider while it snapped at his head. He reached Heller Ridge after midnight with torn sleeves, an empty weapon, and a live specimen beating against the steel. Otto climbed out and spread both hands. I didn't get Peter! Sadie looked past him toward the road. Otto pointed at the cage. I brought the next best thing. Abram ran past him toward the zombie. Apparently, Otto muttered, I rank below science. The rescue had failed, but Peter was alive. Otto had returned, and Abram finally had the live specimen he wanted. In the workshop, I locked the last plate onto the mechanical arm of my unfinished frame. At sunrise, the storm broke. Across Havenport, the dead lifted their faces toward the light. When the storm broke over Havenport, the dead stopped staring at the sun and started climbing buildings. Inside Heller Ridge Lab, I locked the final spine plate onto my exoskeleton, while Abram secured Otto's live zombie behind reinforced glass. The machine on my bench had 1 mechanical arm, 2 shoulder housings, and enough black gold wiring to bankrupt a future settlement. It still could not walk. I cut my palm across the main control grip. Black gold licked through the spine, then stopped at the unfinished left leg. I forced the last brace into place while the frame pulled heat from my blood. The mechanical arm lifted by itself. The shoulder housings turned toward the sound of the zombie behind the glass. That was progress. It was also a machine trying to stand on 1 working leg while its pilot had cracked ribs and no breakfast. Abram pressed sensors against the captive zombie's skull. Green light pulsed beneath the bone in time with the sunrise. "Jared," Abram called, "you should see this. I'm building the reason we survive it." The east camera answered for him. A normal zombie stood in the street below the ridge, its skin darkened red. The shoulders widened, then it jumped through a second-floor window. On another feed, 3 corpses climbed the brick wall of an apartment building and broke inside. The family hiding there had seconds. Abram turned the sound down, but the camera kept showing the result. Rank 1 had arrived. In my first future, that change took weeks. Rank 1 bodies had hardened bone, faster muscle, and enough strength to make ordinary steel feel decorative. This time, sunlight triggered it on the first clear morning. The campus feed showed the same change at the field house. Colin Fitch and the classmates who abandoned me pushed benches against a side entrance while a red-skinned zombie hammered through the glass. Colin pulled one hidden core from his jacket. A student grabbed his wrist. "That could turn you! The door will kill me first!" Colin snapped. He swallowed it. Colin dropped behind the barricade, his back arched, his skin drained pale, and his blonde hair bleached almost white. The rank 1 zombie broke through. Blue energy flashed from Colin's hand and cut across the doorway. The rank 1 zombie flew backward through the broken entrance. The students nearest Colin stopped running. One reached toward him, then froze when Colin's pale eyes turned. The camera died before I saw whether he still sounded human. Colin had power. Whether he still had Colin inside him stayed hidden when the feed died. Abram switched to the mountain road cameras. Bodies filled every lane below Heller Ridge. He counted the first 400 by software. The mass behind them pushed the estimate above 1,000. They were moving uphill in formation. "Zombies don't form marching lanes," Abram said. I pointed at the screen. "These do." Maddox had tracked my blood to the mountain. Delaney had brought the crowd. Her voice came through a stolen emergency radio at the east gate. "Jared," Delaney called, "I know you're watching." The camera found her standing on an old communications tower above the road. Maddox guarded one side. The fire user stood on the other. Delaney lifted both arms. The horde changed direction together. "You left me outside so everyone could watch me beg," she shouted. "Now you get to watch everyone behind your walls die." There was the motive, delivered by the horde queen herself. No detective work required. Abram looked at my unfinished frame. "How long?" I checked the dead leg assembly. "Too long." The first wave hit the outer road. Otto grabbed the energy gun and his blood-bound blade. "I'll keep them away from the gate." "You have limited shots," I warned. Otto pointed toward the reinforced utility car. "She has 4 wheels and a heroic spirit. You know what happened whenever Otto loved a vehicle. It got wrecked." I pointed at it. "The car does not have a spirit." Otto opened the driver's door. "You've hurt her." Sadie took the monitor station. "I'll track the east road. Otto, stay where I can see you." Otto's joke disappeared. "Yes, boss." He drove out before I could finish the leg assembly. Outside the east gate, Otto fired one green blast through the first line of zombies. The shot cleared the road and left the gun dark. He rammed the next wave with the utility car, waited for the charge light, and fired again. The horde kept coming. Otto leaned out the window with the blade and cut a red-skinned zombie twice across the neck. The first strike sparked. The second opened the joint enough for the third to finish it. He shouted over the radio. "Your rank 1 warning could have included the part where they ignore good craftsmanship." I told him, "Hit the same place again." Preferred the old customers. For several minutes, the car goblin looked like a real battlefield driver. He used wrecks as barriers and pulled groups into narrow lanes. Each gun charge hit the front row instead of the loudest target. Sadie fed him routes from the camera wall. Otto followed every call. When she warned him about a blind corner, he reversed through it and crushed the 3 zombies waiting there. "Still visible?" Otto asked. Sadie tracked another wave. "Unfortunately." He grinned and drove harder. That swagger drew exactly the attention it deserved. Then Delaney turned the horde toward him. A zombie flew over the car. Otto swerved. A second body hit the windshield. A third landed beneath the front axle. Delaney was using the horde like thrown debris. Maddox dropped from a roof and crushed the hood with both feet. Otto fired point blank. Maddox twisted aside, and the blast tore through the car roof. The fire user struck the rear quarter in a wave of heat. The utility car spun across the road and hit the retaining wall. Otto slapped the dashboard. "Stay with me." Then the car lost a door. Beautiful partnership. Maddox ripped the gun from Otto's hand before it recharged. Otto drew the blade, but every swing drained his blood and strength. Delaney accelerated the horde around him. Zombies packed the road, the wall, and the roof of the crippled car. Otto cut one down. 2 more climbed over it. The fire user melted the blade's outer edge. Maddox kicked Otto against the wall. His last clean strike barely scratched the red skin of a rank 1 corpse. One zombie pinned his sword arm. Another opened its mouth beside his neck. Otto looked toward the lab and whispered, "Jared, now would be excellent." The green barrage came from the workshop roof. 3 cannon shots erased the bodies around him. My finished exoskeleton, the Titan frame, landed between Otto and the bite. The zombie's teeth closed on empty air. I caught its head in the mechanical hand, lifted it above Otto, and threw it through the horde coming behind us. Maddox stopped advancing. The fire user's flames dipped. On the tower, Delaney stepped back, saw the horde looking up at her, and raised her chin. Mechanical legs cracked the road. A black gold arm caught the rank 1 zombie by its chest and drove it through the retaining wall. The frame locked around me through a spinal harness. Shoulder cannons followed my eyes, boosters carried the weight, and the mechanical arm supplied the strength my young body lacked. I had built it from scrap, stolen cores, and pure spite. Walking through 1,000 zombies sounded tedious. My missing abs had filed another complaint. The Titan frame ignored them. Otto stared up from the road. For once, no words arrived. Abram supplied enough for both of us over the radio. You built a giant mechanical suit in my workshop. Keep the gate closed, I told him. Abram's voice rose. That was admiration. Sadie cut through the argument. More zombies are moving around the west wall. I pointed the Titan's mechanical hand toward Otto. Get inside. Guard Sadie and Abram. Otto recovered his gun and stood. You saved me with a machine like that and now I have to leave? I told him. You can admire it after you stop bleeding. He ran for the gate. I turned toward the horde. The Titan frame crossed the road in 3 boosted steps. The first punch cleared a lane through 20 bodies. The shoulder cannons fired down both sides and split the mass around the walls. I caught a wrecked van by its frame and shoved it across the road as a moving barricade. The horde packed against it. 1 cannon burst turned the traffic jam into a clean path for Otto. Delaney's formation broke. Maddox dragged himself from the crater in the hood. The fire user abandoned Otto and climbed toward the tower to protect the only person still giving orders. Then, the nearest zombies began glowing from inside. 1 hit the Titan's chest and exploded. Black gold force tore armor from my left shoulder. 3 more bodies detonated against the mechanical legs. They had walked into the blast willingly. Abram shouted through the radio, "Those cores are rupturing before impact!" The live specimen behind him started beating its head against the glass in the same rhythm. Abram left the battlefield and ran toward the research room. Of course he did. 1,000 zombies were outside, and the self-appointed professor had found a science side quest. I followed the pulse instead. Every exploding body answered a signal from the communications tower. Delaney stood at the top with black lines moving beneath her skin. She still looked human. I ate 7 cores, Delaney called down. Maddox brought them to me. They chose me. She closed one fist. Another line of zombies charged the Titan and detonated. The impact forced me back 1 step. Delaney smiled. You should have opened the door. Boosted upward. Zombie shields piled across the tower. I broke the first with the mechanical arm and burned through the second with a shoulder cannon. The fire user covered the upper stairs in flame. I drove the Titan through the heat and fired beside the creature's head. The blast tore away the platform. The fire user jumped to the next roof and kept running. Maddox met me at the top. He struck the Titan's chest hard enough to dent the plate. I caught his second fist and squeezed until his knees hit steel. Delaney ordered 6 zombies between us. I threw Maddox through them, then I reached her. Delaney tried to step behind another shield. The Titan's hand caught her first. I punched her across the tower. She hit the far railing and dropped to 1 knee. Scorecard: Horde Queen, 0. Giant Hand, 1. Delaney screamed and sent every nearby zombie at me. She stacked them 3 bodies deep across the platform. 1 corpse crawled over another. 2 jumped from the railing to hit the Titan from above. I cleared the shield with 1 sweeping blast, crossed the platform, and pinned her beneath the Titan's palm. The girl who once used a class title to control a room now needed both hands to lift 1 metal finger. She failed. Delaney glared up at me. Why do you hate me this much? I opened the faceplate so she could hear me without the speakers. You cost me an arm. Her expression changed. I kept the Titan's hand against her chest. Later, you held me underwater for the location of people who trusted me. I remember every second. Delaney's eyes widened. She looked from my face to the Titan's hand. This one was built for you, I told her. Maddox roared and charged from behind. I turned the wrist cannon on him. The first blast took his attacking arm. The second threw him off the tower and through the roof below. Delaney reached toward the horde. Black light gathered around her fingers for another detonation. I closed the Titan's hand until the light broke. Her scream carried across the road. The class rep saint had become a horde queen, eaten 7 cores, and brought 1,000 witnesses. She still ended up under my hand. I raised the cannon for the final shot, then every ordinary zombie around the base convulsed at once. Red spread across hundreds of bodies. Limbs thickened, spines straightened. The horde began climbing the outer walls faster than Delaney could command it. Rank 1 evolution had jumped again in the middle of my revenge. The west alarm sounded. Sadie's voice hit my radio. They're inside the lower yard, Otto shouted behind her. My blade is barely cutting them. I had Delaney pinned. I had waited 50 years for the next second. The base had Sadie inside it. I threw Delaney from the tower into the evolving horde and fired both shoulder cannons after her. Green fire tore through the bodies where she landed. When the smoke cleared, I saw pieces of zombies and no confirmed body. Delaney's death stayed unproven. I hated that answer. I chose the base anyway. The Titan frame glided down the mountain on its boosters. Inside the lower yard, Otto struck a rank 1 zombie across the ribs. His melted blade left a bright line and nothing else. Same joint, I called. Break the armor with the first strike, open it with the second, finish with the third. Otto hit the shoulder again. Bone cracked. His next cut took the head. The kill gave him one breath. I landed beside him and drove the Titan's fist through the next creature. 2 rank 1 zombies climbed the east wall. I caught one with the shoulder cannon and used the mechanical arm to pull the other back into the yard. At the west breach, 6 more had reached the workshop doors. One rank 1 creature ripped a security shutter from its track. Another reached through the opening toward Sadie. Otto hit that arm twice with the damaged blade and bought her room to move. I boosted across the compound and crushed the first pair against the ground. Then I fired through the rest before they reached Abram's glass room. Sadie ran ammunition cells from the workshop to Otto. Abram shouted research observations through the intercom while refusing to leave his specimen. Otto held the east gate. Sadie kept the cells moving. Abram called the pulse changes. I cleared both breaches until the remaining horde lost Delaney's direction and scattered downhill. By noon, more than 1,000 bodies covered the road and lower yard. The Titan frame stood. Barely. My arms shook inside the harness. Half the shoulder armor was gone. The old sword tier had failed against rank 1, the base walls had broken, and Delaney had disappeared inside the smoke. We survived the 1,000-body horde, but the first red core on the floor told me the old rules were dead. The machine I built from it would tear across Havenport and lead us straight to the one problem I could not punch. At dawn after the siege, Sadie brought me water while Otto cracked open the rank 1 zombie he had finally killed. The corpse had survived 3 sword strikes. Its skull paid better. A red core rolled into Otto's palm, warm enough to steam in the morning air. Otto held it up. Please tell me this buys my own giant robot. Abram snatched the core before Otto could pocket it. Green light moved inside the red shell like a pulse. The self-appointed professor forgot the broken walls, the body field, and basic personal space. This material is still active, Abram said. The density is several times higher. I took the core and felt the pressure through my glove. That came from rank 1, I told him. The threat grade rose, so did the reward grade. The old sword had failed because ordinary cores could not push enough energy through its edge. One red core carried more force in a smaller space. Abram said an ordinary core, and the red 1-on-2 charging plates. The ordinary core lit one indicator. The red core woke every light on its plate and cracked the glass beneath it. Otto leaned closer. That little thing has anger issues. It came from something that tried to eat you, I told him. The personality carried over. Otto looked from the pearl to the damaged Titan frame. Excellent. I'll take 2 legs, 2 cannons, and cup holders. You can take a shovel. His smile died. More than 1,000 bodies covered the road and lower yard. Every intact skull held fuel, weapon material, or a bad surprise. I pointed at the field. Harvest everything usable. Otto stared at me. I defended this mountain. You also asked for a machine. He looked at the cores again. Greed recovered him immediately. Sadie sat beside the collection crates and counted while Otto worked. Abram tested each red core near the live specimen's chamber. I used the Titan's damaged arm to drag the heaviest bodies into rows. By noon, our defenders had become an industrial skull-opening crew. Look, dignity had already left the apocalypse. We might as well keep the resources. The final haul filled every reinforced bin in Abram's workshop. We added the cores from Ronan's stockpile and the ones saved before the siege. Sadie wrote each count on the workshop glass. Otto tried to round his total upward. She made him reopen 3 bags and count again. I fought 1,000 zombies, Otto complained. Sadie tapped the wrong number. You can survive arithmetic. She had gone pale by the final crate, but she refused to leave until the count balanced. 2,000 ordinary cores! 12 red cores. Otto leaned against the last crate, covered in mud and extremely proud of himself. My machine should be taller than yours, he announced. Your last 3 vehicles died in under a week. They died serving, I told him. They died near you. Abram placed a red core beneath a shielded lamp. Green light brightened inside it and turned toward the heat. The live zombie turned its head when Abram moved the lamp. That was enough. Black gold fed on light and heat. Blood bound it to weapons. Swallowing it forced the same energy into flesh. Delaney survived 7 doses. Most people died on 1. Abram lowered the shield. You knew all of that before I ran one test. I kept sorting the red cores. I learned from people who survived longer than they should have. That answer is getting old. So am I. Abram studied my face. You look 20. My knees disagree. The room tilted before he could ask again. I had built the Titan through a storm, fought 1,000 bodies, and dragged half the field by machine. My young body had reached its limit. 3 steps from the bench, my legs failed. I hit the floor before Abram caught my shoulder. Sadie shouted my name from the doorway. I slept until sunset. By the time I woke, a surviving traffic camera had caught the fire user beneath a collapsed awning. The creature held a core near its mouth, stared at it, then lowered its hand. One forced dose had already ruined its body. On the roof above, Colin Fitch watched with pale eyes and white hair. He was the classmate who swallowed a core when Rank 1 zombies breached the fieldhouse. Colin left before the fire user noticed him. He had retained enough reason to watch and leave without attacking. Why he did that stayed hidden. That same morning across town, Peter reached the market. I learned the details from him later. Sadie's father crossed the ruined block in his torn raincoat. Zombie remains still covered his sleeves, but the stronger dead had already made the scent trick unreliable. He found the shutter crushed beneath Otto's first truck and the front wall missing. Peter entered through the wreckage and called Sadie's name. Nobody answered. Then he found her note beneath the counter. She had written that she was searching for him and heading toward Heller Ridge. Peter pressed the paper to his chest, grabbed the remaining supplies, and left through the back before another horde reached the block. Father and daughter had crossed the same city in opposite directions. The apocalypse had terrible timing and no shame about it. Back at Heller Ridge, I woke after dark and emptied the core bins onto the workshop floor. The Titan frame had saved the base. Its damaged armor also proved one machine could not carry every mission. We needed speed, protection, storage, and enough violence to cross Rank 1 streets without stopping every 20 yards. So I built a vehicle. I stripped armor from the utility wreck, reinforced the frame with black gold channels, and fed the red cores into separate housings. Each one heated the workbench until the tools burned through my gloves. Otto tried to help after midnight. He fell asleep sitting inside an unfinished wheel well with a wrench in his hand. Abram took one photograph for blackmail and returned to the cooling pumps. By dawn, my arms shook harder than they had after the siege. The machine still started on the first pulse. One sleepless night consumed 2,000 ordinary cores and 12 red ones. The result was a low, black-armored machine with reinforced wheels and a hood broad enough to bully a bus. At sunrise, I rolled it into the vehicle bay. Otto stood beside the ruined utility car with one hand over his heart. She carried me through battle, he said. She deserved a respectful retirement. The new engine started. Green light ran beneath the armor. The reinforced tires settled under the weight, and the workshop windows rattled from the engine pulse. Abram stepped out of the control booth and stared at the machine. You used all 12 red cores. They wanted a field test, I told him. Otto abandoned the funeral before the old car finished cooling. He walked around the new vehicle twice, touched the hood, and whispered, I forgive the universe. I opened the driver's door. This is the Gravecrawler, my new armored vehicle. Otto climbed halfway inside, then backed out to hug me. I held him away with one arm. Respect the machine. Fear the builder. I can do both. Sadie entered the bay carrying her backpack. I'm coming, she said. Her fever had eased, but her face was still pale. Rank 1 zombies could cross a roof faster than she could cross the yard. No, I told her. Sadie's grip tightened around the backpack. The drone found my father's last route. I know what he looks for. I know his habits. You also collapsed during the siege. I kept the east gate alive. I told her, you did, from behind reinforced walls. Sadie looked at the Gravecrawler, then at me. Her eyes filled before she set the backpack on the floor. I closed the passenger door and did not reopen the argument. Abram cleared his throat from the workbench. She can operate this instead. He lifted a repaired black gold drone. It could launch from the roof and relay live video across the city. Sadie wiped her face and took the controls. Abram showed her one command. She corrected his camera angle on the first try. I can scan ahead and send routes to the Gravecrawler, Sadie said. I checked the feed on the vehicle screen. You stay inside the lab. Sadie met my eyes. I run the search. Agree. That compromise gave her a real job and kept her blood inside her body. Rare apocalypse diplomacy win. An hour later, Otto and I drove downhill while Sadie's drone moved above us. I wore the damaged Titan frame with the faceplate repaired and one shoulder cannon working. Otto sat behind the Gravecrawler's controls like a man trusted with a national secret and several bad impulses. Which button starts the weapons? Otto asked. One button at a time. There are 12. I warned him. Giving you the whole panel is how cities disappear. Sadie's voice came through the speakers. The underpass ahead is flooded. Turn north at the pharmacy. Rank 1 movement on the roofs. 4 left, 3 right. Otto turned before the road disappeared beneath water. Her first call saved the vehicle before its first fight. Then the first zombie dropped onto the hood hard enough to dent a normal truck. The Gravecrawler barely moved. 2 more landed on the roof. Their claws scraped across the armor and found no seam. Otto grinned. I love her. 4th rank 1 zombie smashed against his window. Press the green switch, I told him. Otto hit it. Electric light raced across the outer armor. The 4 zombies locked stiff, flared green, and fell away as smoking shapes. The armor's charge bar dropped sharply. Red cores held more energy, but the Gravecrawler still had limits. Spam the discharge and we would become a sealed metal lunchbox. Otto stared through the windshield. Again. Find another problem first. Let the armor recharge. The next problem filled the street. A horde packed the avenue between 2 wrecked buses. The front line climbed over the roofs while the rest pressed behind them. Sadie marked a narrow path on our screen. Right side, the pavement is clear under the bodies. I pointed to a red lever. Spikes! Otto pulled it. Metal teeth extended from the tires. The Gravecrawler climbed the first wreck and rolled across the horde without losing speed. A rank 1 creature leaped from a traffic light toward the windshield. I tapped the next control. A green laser cut across the road and dropped it before impact. Otto reached toward 3 more buttons. I slapped his hand away. 1 apocalypse at a time. He looked personally oppressed. The avenue narrowed near the river. Bodies jammed beneath the front bumper until the vehicle began losing speed. Now the black switch, I said. A grinder opened beneath the reinforced nose. The blockage vanished into the collector channel. The machine separated black gold cores into a shielded bin behind our seats. A red core clinked into the tray. Otto made a sound I had never heard from an adult man, then he hugged me while driving. The Gravecrawler drifted toward a concrete wall. I shoved him back into his seat and caught the wheel. Celebrate after steering. She collects her own cores. She also kills us if you drive with your emotions. The rear camera caught a figure on a rooftop lowering binoculars. The watcher disappeared behind the ledge before I could turn the cannon. Our machine had solved the horde. The core tray behind us kept filling, which meant every attack partly paid for the next mile. Otto noticed that and started looking at the city like it owed him money. It had also shown an unknown watcher exactly what the vehicle could do. Sadie's drone kept moving east. 30 minutes later, her voice changed. I found Dad's car. The feed showed a wrecked vehicle half a mile ahead, crushed beside an overpass. 1 door hung open. Dark stains covered the seats. No body lay inside. Otto drove through the final cluster while I cleared the roofline. We stopped beside the wreck, and I checked every nearby corpse. Peter was gone. His supply boxes remained in the back. At Heller Ridge, Sadie stared at the same feed through the drone controls. She reached toward the image of Peter's empty seat. Then she fell forward across the console. Sadie! Abram's voice broke through the channel. The vehicle high died instantly. We abandoned the search and returned to the ridge with Peter's boxes. Abram put Sadie in the medical room. Then he sent Otto and me toward the downtown hospital. Her leukemia had advanced. The medicine in the lab could lower fever and pain. It could no longer keep her blood stable. Abram looked at me through the glass. Bring back transfusion supplies, antibiotics, and anything a real hospital kept locked away. I had a Titan frame, an armored monster car, and enough cores to flatten a street. None of them could make blood behave. Otto opened Peter's first black case before we left. Inside were sealed packets of unmarked pills. No pharmacy label, no dosage, no manufacturer. 1 pill gave off a faint black gold response when I held it near the Titan's grip. A second packet carried the same dark dust beneath its coating. Otto turned the box over twice. Peter was searching for leukemia medicine. Why carry pills with no name? The pills gave us 1 fact and a worse question. Peter had been carrying something connected to the material-changing Havenport. We still had no father and no source for the pills. So Otto loaded the cases into the Gravecrawler. I sealed the Titan's mask. Then we drove toward an occupied hospital, carrying medicine that might already be part of the disease. While Otto and I drove toward the downtown hospital, a recording recovered later showed the wounded fire creature. The creature lay inside an abandoned subway entrance. A blond man in a brimmed hat stepped through the barricade carrying a silver injector. The creature raised fire. The stranger vanished before the flames touched him and appeared beside its shoulder. He drove the injector into its neck. The fire collapsed inward. Charred skin cleared. The warped body shrank until an adult man lay on the concrete, breathing through human lungs again. He stared at his restored hands. Dorian Niles, he whispered, giving us the first identity we ever had for the fire user. The blond stranger offered him a coat. You can keep this shape. Come with people who understand what you are. Dorian tried to summon fire again. Only a weak orange line crossed his fingers. The blond stranger held out 3 more injectors. Stay alone, and this body fails. Stay with us, and you get medicine, cores, and a place among your own kind. Dorian looked toward the street where the Titan had broken him. Can you make this permanent? The stranger tapped the remaining injectors. Permanent requires obedience, more cores, and better medicine. We provide all 3. Dorian took the coat. The stranger pocketed the remaining injectors, and Dorian followed him into the tunnel. Our enemy had found a way to recruit ability users by restoring their bodies. At the downtown hospital, warning paint covered the entrance and the halls smelled sweet enough to be suspicious. One message stretched across the lobby wall: "Don't breathe." Otto read it, sniffed once, and immediately made the least useful choice available. "Smells like candy." His knees buckled. I caught him before his face reached the tile. The damaged Titan frame sealed its mask around me. A green indicator showed poison moving through the ventilation ducts. The rule was simple. The sweet gas disabled anyone without filtered air. Otto had inhaled enough to stay unconscious for hours. I dragged him behind the reception desk and fired the working shoulder cannon into the nearest vent. Metal folded. Gas burst from the ceiling in a white cloud. Steel shutters dropped across the hall ahead. The operator was sealing me inside the poison instead of trading gunfire around medical supplies. Smart. Annoying, but smart. I drove the Titan's hand beneath the first shutter and lifted. Motors screamed above me. The second shutter dropped behind my back. The gas thickened around the frame. My filter held, but the damaged mask seal flashed yellow. I had minutes before the hospital became my metal coffin. I crossed the imaging room, followed the fresh ductwork, and ripped the control box from the wall. Every shutter stopped halfway. Then a syringe struck the Titan's shoulder plate and shattered harmlessly. The woman on the other side of the glass sighed. "That dose costs more than your driver," broke the glass with one finger. The operator waited inside a sealed research wing. She wore a fitted lab coat over combat boots and held another syringe between two fingers. She was an adult doctor, sharp-eyed, annoyingly attractive, and standing beside the antidote Otto needed. In my defense, a man could notice danger and excellent cheekbones at the same time. She noticed me noticing. The doctor tapped the Titan's chest plate. "Does the Demon King inside the scrap metal crown speak?" I raised the mechanical fist beside her head. "Do princesses always poison their guests?" "Only the uninvited ones." The doctor placed one clear vial on the Titan's knuckles. "That is his antidote. Finish the punch and your driver's breathing may stop." I stopped the fist an inch from her face. She had stopped a mecha punch with one bottle and pure audacity. The doctor did not step back. That confidence interested me more than the face. "My name is Dr. Poppy Kerr," she said. "Virus research, anesthetics, emergency medicine. You may call me the princess of this hospital. The poison princess fits better." Poppy smiled. "Good. The Demon King has taste." She circled the Titan and examined the black gold seams while the fist stayed raised. "Take me to whoever built this," Poppy demanded. "I wake your driver. I bring my research. Your creator gives me workshop access." I opened the faceplate. "You're looking at the creator." Poppy's smile shifted. She checked my young face, the damaged armor, and my hands on the controls. Then she pressed the antidote into my palm. "Prove it by carrying your friend without dropping him." In my first future, Dr. Poppy Kerr's gas research kept entire shelters alive during outbreak breaches. She was brilliant, lethal, and famous for working with people she had threatened 5 minutes earlier. Useful woman. Terrible bedside manner. I injected Otto. His eyes opened, but the poison dragged him backward before the room returned. Otto later described the memory in broken pieces. Years before the apocalypse, Otto waited with the getaway vehicle during his last failed heist. Kirk Dune and Faye Dune entered the guarded building. Kirk was the inside man. Faye kept their signal rig alive. Then, the signal cut out. Otto held position because Kirk had ordered it. A voice using Faye's call sign sent him toward the wrong exit. Gunfire hit the dead channel. Otto reached the backup point and found nobody. He never learned who sent the false rouse or where his crew went. In the poison dream, Kirk accused Otto of abandoning them while Faye reached for the dead radio. Otto woke, calling both names. Poppy watched him sit up. "Interesting guilt response." Otto focused on her syringe. "Did you rummage through my brain? The gas chooses the memory." Poppy pointed at stacked research cases. "Carry those." Otto looked offended. "I'm recovering." Poppy held up an empty specimen jar. "You can recover as one gentleman or 3 educational samples." Otto grabbed every case. "True gentleman," Poppy decided. I pointed at the stacked medical cases. "A 14-year-old named Sadie has leukemia at Hella Ridge. Bring anything that can buy her time." Poppy's smile disappeared. She loaded her research into the gravecrawler. We took blood supplies, antibiotics, sealed equipment, and every case she chose. Otto tried to leave one heavy case behind. Poppy opened it and showed him bags of matched plasma. "That case may buy Sadie days," Poppy told him. Otto lifted it without another complaint. The moment the last case entered the vehicle, the hospital roof collapsed. A many-eyed chimera dropped across the exit. It had plated shoulders, too many moving pupils, and a black gold housing bolted beneath its chest. The creature had been built to guard the research wing. Poppy climbed into the gravecrawler. "That is why I stayed upstairs." Otto stared through the windshield. "You could have mentioned the final boss. You were unconscious." I closed the Titan's faceplate. "Get Poppy to Hella Ridge." Otto gripped the wheel. "You're staying? The road is behind it." I stepped between the chimera and the vehicle. The beast opened 6 eyes at once. Purple light gathered across them. I fired the shoulder cannon first. The beam struck its front plate, bent across the polished surface, and came back into the Titan's left side. Armor exploded from my ribs. The Chimera raised the same front plate for another reflection. I gave it the mechanical fist. The first punch turned its head. The second hit the same plate and exposed bolts beneath the skin. The creature swept one armored limb across the parking lot and threw me through an ambulance. My frame hit concrete with half its power gone. The Chimera charged the cannon housing while its eyes tracked the weapon. One eye fired at the gravecrawler as Otto reversed toward the street. I caught the beam on the Titan's ruined shoulder and took the impact instead. The armor plate tore free. Otto escaped with Poppy and Sadie's medicine, but my left side lost another layer of protection. The beast turned every eye back toward the cannon. Every plate and pupil tracked the cannon housing. Its defenses rotated around the implanted metal and the core housing beneath its chest. Somebody had engineered the pattern. I fired at the pavement beside its right legs. The reflected blast forced the creature to twist its plated chest away from the explosion. The housing opened for 1 second. I boosted under its reach, caught the exposed frame, and ripped 2 bolts free. A line of surgical metal ran beneath the muscle. Another plate carried grooves stamped by industrial tools. The Chimera slammed me into the hospital wall. I kept one hand inside the housing. Its claws crushed the Titan's forearm against the brick, and warning lights filled my faceplate. I released the trapped arm, dropped lower, and used the frame's full weight to drive my shoulder into the open housing. It tried to reflect another cannon shot. I stopped using the cannon. 3 mechanical punches broke the outer frame. The 4th crushed the black gold housing. The many eyes lost their light together. The Chimera fell across the parking lot. I tore a core bigger than my fist from the manufacture cavity. The body had been manufactured. Seams crossed the creature's muscles. Metal plates had grown into infected tissue. The core sat inside a built housing designed for control. Someone in Havenport was manufacturing monsters decades before the technology should exist. Slow clapping came from the hospital roof. The blonde man from the subway recording stood above me in the same brimmed hat. At that moment, I knew only that he had watched the fight. He introduced himself with a bow. Crispin Snow, recruiter for the Ascendant Circle. The faction finally had a name. Crispin pointed north. My people control a district full of survivors and ability users. We can restore bodies, build creatures, and finish what your doctor only understands in theory. Come meet us. His offer put Sadie's cure beside the people manufacturing monsters. Cheap bait. Effective bait. My people would like to meet the mechanic who keeps stealing our assets, Crispin added. I fired the shoulder cannon. The blast hit him squarely. His body vanished in a black gold flash, and Crispin stepped from behind a wrecked ambulance without a mark. I boosted forward and drove the Titan's fist through his chest. The body in my hand broke into light. Crispin appeared on the roof again, brushing dust from his coat. I fired a short burst across every escape angle. 3 impacts struck him from different directions. 3 copies broke into black gold light, while the real man stepped onto a street lamp behind me. He had substitutions prepared before he approached. The ability cost him something, because the 3rd reappearance left blood at one nostril. He still smiled. Teleporters were the worst. Every clean hit killed a decoy while the real man popped up somewhere annoying. Crispin smiled. Come to the Northern District. Bring the doctor. Refuse, and we keep improving the city without you. I launched the giant core at his head. He vanished before it arrived. The core cratered the roof. Crispin's voice came from somewhere behind the buildings. Someone else remembers what humanity becomes, Jared. Then he was gone. He knew my name. His faction built psychic beasts. Their recruiter moved with black gold control that belonged far beyond this year. I had suspected the timeline was changing. Now I suspected somebody from the future was changing it on purpose. By nightfall at Heller Ridge, Otto brought Poppy into the workshop. He pointed at Abram. Dr. Poppy Kerr, meet Abram Heller. He calls himself Professor. Poppy saw the gravecrawler in Titan parts, grabbed Abram's hand, and smiled. Professor Heller, a pleasure to meet the genius responsible for all this. Abram stood taller. At last, professional recognition. Otto dropped the research cases. He built the drone charger. Abram glared at him. Poppy looked at me. So the Demon King really built the crown. I mentioned that. I was distracted by the crown. Then Poppy entered Sadie's medical room and every joke stopped. She checked Sadie's blood, fever, bruising, and breathing. Abram gave her the donor notebook and the supplies we had recovered. Poppy stepped out 20 minutes later. She had removed the playful smile and rolled Sadie's blood chart into one tight tube. Otto moved toward her first. Abram blocked his path with one arm because both men already knew the answer would hurt. At best, she has a few months, Poppy told us. 3 months is my working estimate from her current condition. It could be less. Sadie heard through the open door. Her face stayed still. Otto's did not. Ordinary treatment could slow the decline. It could not replace the blood-forming cells already failing. Poppy set the massive chimera core beside Abram's notes. Black gold forces damaged tissue to regenerate. Abram answered. It also forces mutation. Then we control the dose, Poppy said. We guide the regeneration and stop before the core rewrites her. Abram folded his arms. You cannot promise where that line is, Poppy answered without looking away. I can promise where the Kurug line ends. She dies. Sadie heard that too. She turned her face toward us and lifted one hand from the blanket. I entered the room. We decide after we understand the risk. Sadie's voice was weak. You already understand the other option. Nobody argued with her. I looked through the glass at the massive core beside Abram's notes. The only plausible cure used the same material that had warped people, powered Delaney's horde, and built the beast outside the hospital. Poppy could attempt it. The Ascendant Circle already knew we needed her, and somewhere ahead of us, a second future player was using the same black gold to manufacture monsters. The only plausible cure for Sadie used the same material inside the Ascendant Circle's monsters. So the next morning, I searched the city for Peter and proof of what the Circle had done to human bodies. Sadie's drone caught movement inside an abandoned shopping mall beside Peter's last route. The upper floor still held medical storage. I entered alone in the damaged Titan frame. Otto kept the gravecrawler outside while Sadie searched from the lab. Poppy and Abram stayed with her because the 3-month estimate had turned every trip into a countdown. The mall's lower floor sat under 4 feet of water. A clothing display floated past the escalator. Something large moved beneath it. I saw the wake before I saw the body. The aquatic beast hit the Titan from the side and drove me through a glass railing. We landed in the flooded atrium. Water covered the boosters. Warning lights filled my faceplate. The creature circled faster than the frame could turn. It had a long, plated body, hooked limbs, and a human shape fused into the mass near its chest. One adult woman was still alive inside it. Her eyes opened. Then, the beast struck again. The impact cracked my repaired mask and filled the lower seal with water. I fired the shoulder cannon at point-blank range. The shot tore one plate away, but the creature twisted around the blast and wrapped 2 limbs across the Titan's chest. It dragged me deeper. My frame had beaten a horde on land. In a pool, it became several thousand pounds of expensive drowning equipment. Look, I had already drowned once because of Delaney. I refused to make it a hobby. I released the spinal lock and pulled one arm free of the harness. The beast tightened around the machine. I drew the compact handgun from Ronan's armory and fired into the exposed joint beside the human body. The creature recoiled. That gave me enough room to break the surface. I caught one breath before a tail struck my back and sent me under again. While I fought in the mall, Sadie's drone found an adult woman trapped 6 blocks away. She stood on the 3rd floor of a half-built construction site. I watched the recording later. Rank 1 zombies climbed the scaffolding below her. She had 1 metal pipe and no safe route down. Sadie marked the position on Otto's screen. She may have seen Peter. Get her now. Otto turned the gravecrawler toward the site. The woman shouted from the concrete edge. My name is Holly Pruitt. I need help finding my sister. Rank 1 zombie reached the 3rd floor. Otto hit the electric armor before it landed on the hood. Then he drove up the construction ramp, cut the next creature with the side laser, and stopped beneath Holly's ledge. Apocalypse Rescue Team, Otto announced through the speaker. Terrible hours. Excellent vehicle. Holly jumped onto the roof as the grinder cleared the bodies behind them. Sadie's drone swung back toward the mall. My camera feed had gone red. Otto stopped celebrating. He drove straight through the mall entrance. In the flooded atrium, the beast had pinned the Titan against the bottom. The human woman inside stared at me through the water. Her mouth moved around one clear word. Help! The creature's outer body still tried to crush me. The gravecrawler's laser cut through the water and struck one of its plated eyes. The beast released the Titan and turned toward the vehicle. Otto opened the driver's door with his blood-bound blade ready. I leave for one rescue, and you start a swimming side quest. I forced the Titan upright. Drive closer! Otto shook his head. That is the opposite of rescue. Closer, Otto. He obeyed. The creature lunged at the gravecrawler. I caught its rear plate with the Titan's mechanical hand and pulled it sideways. Otto hit the electric armor. Current moved through the water and locked the beast's limbs for 1 second. I used that second to tear the human section free of the deepest plating. The beast screamed with the woman's voice. I raised the Titan's fist to finish it before the body recovered. Holly climbed through the open roof hatch. She saw the woman fused into the creature and screamed, Inez, my sister! The name stopped my fist. The beast turned its damaged face toward her. The woman inside whispered, Holly. Holly jumped into the shallow edge of the pool and stood between us. Inez Pruitt is my sister, Holly told me. She's still in there, I cut in. She nearly drowned me. Inez dragged one damaged limb away from Holly instead of attacking again. Otto stepped beside my Titan. I just pulled you out of a pool. Spend the favor by listening for 10 seconds. Sadie's voice came through the drone speaker. Control the exit, check her hands, then choose. She used the lesson I had beaten into her against me. Very rude. Also effective. I kept the fist raised. You have 10 seconds! Inez forced the outer body lower. Her voice shook through the creature's chest. The circle took me. They put black gold inside the animal and fused me to it. I woke when you attacked. I could not stop the first charge. She lifted one human hand from the plating and opened it toward Holly. The claws copied the movement a second later, and Inez's face twisted with pain. Holly kept both hands against her sister's face. She knows me. That is enough to move her. I told Holly, it is enough to delay execution, nothing more. Sadie answered through the drone. Then delay it. I lowered the Titan's fist. The boss fight had become a family reunion. The Ascendant Circle had lost 2 victims in one morning. By evening, Holly and the beast she called Inez reached the lab with us. Inez remained in the reinforced vehicle bay because her fused body could break a normal room by turning around. Holly refused to leave her side. Inside the lab, Holly explained how the sisters had been separated. They had fled east together by car when the outbreak began. A man in a torn raincoat found them trapped near a zombie crowd. He covered himself in infected remains, showed them how to mask their scent, and guided them through the dead. Then he left to search for his daughter. Ronan's gang captured Holly after their car failed. She was the bruised captive who had shown me Ronan's stockpile during the blackout, then vanished into the storm. The Ascendant Circle took Inez from the same district. They fused her into the aquatic beast and used pain to keep the outer body aggressive. Sadie entered the vehicle bay wrapped in a blanket. She asked Holly, "Did the man tell you his name?" "Peter Rudd," Holly answered. "Short dark hair, gray raincoat. He kept checking a donor notebook, and we told him our names before he left." Sadie stopped breathing for one beat. "That's my dad," Holly nodded. "He saved both of us before we were separated." Sadie grabbed Holly's sleeve. "Which way did he go?" Her knees folded before Holly could answer. "I caught her before she hit the concrete." Holly cleared the path. Inez pulled her claws tight against the floor so nobody had to pass near them. Poppy stabilized Sadie in the medical room. When I stepped back into the workshop, Abram closed the door behind me. He had watched me predict mutations, build future weapons, recognize Poppy, and name technology before it existed. Now a faction with engineered beasts had called me by name. Abram folded both arms. "One honest answer before you send anyone out again." Otto stood beside him, preferably the answer explaining why you complain like an old man and build like a defense contractor from the moon. Poppy joined us from the medical doorway. "I would also like the Demon King's origin story. They had earned it." More importantly, secrecy had become a survival risk. Abram switched on the intercom to the medical wing and vehicle bay. The whole base heard what followed. "I came from 50 years in the future," I told them. Otto nodded immediately. "That explains everything." Abram stared at him. "It explains nothing," Otto pointed at me. "It explains the knees." Poppy looked me over once. "Nearly 70 with that face. The apocalypse finally produced a useful cosmetic procedure." I told her, "Regression, terrible recovery plan, excellent skin." Otto's grin vanished as I described the first outbreak. Morning, the bite, and the arm I cut off. Society collapsed while black gold became fuel, currency, weapons, medicine, and chains. I survived for roughly 50 years. Near the end, a future mechanic and doctor used a unique black gold device to send my consciousness backward. The machine could reach the moment of my first exposure, so I woke 10 seconds before Delaney opened Aaron's door. It could not send me earlier than that anchor. I brought memories. My body came back young. The transfer worked once for me. I knew nothing about another traveler or another device. Abram sat down without looking for a chair and nearly missed it. Poppy asked the question that mattered. Did humanity survive those 50 years? Some of us did, I answered. I placed one ordinary core beside the massive Chimera core. Most survivors became dependent on this material. Mechanics built cities around it. Tyrants controlled the supply. I started collecting early because I knew every weapon tier we would need. Otto's smile disappeared. And the Ascendant Circle? They did not exist this early in my history. Poppy stepped to the sealed door and checked the air system. Then your future story needs one more rule. Poppy looked at all three of us. The virus is airborne. Abram reached for his mask. Poppy stopped him. You already inhaled it. Everyone in Havenport did. Natural resistance kept many people from changing immediately. Bites and concentrated exposure could overwhelm that resistance. Swallowing a core forced the process into one violent dose. Otto looked at the bite scars on the dead specimen behind Abram's glass. So everybody carries the match. A bite pours fuel on it. Poppy nodded. Close enough. I showed the room Crispin's invitation and the footage of Dorian's restored body. The Ascendant Circle is accelerating mutation, I said. They build psychic beasts, recruit ability users, and talk like ordinary humans are obsolete. Poppy watched Dorian follow the recruiter into the tunnel. That's cringe, she said. Nobody laughed. Abram brought Peter's unmarked pills from the analysis bench and cracked one against a blood-attuned plate. Green veins spread through the metal. Black gold, Abram said. The plate proved the circle could package the catalyst as medicine. Water contamination remained a theory, but I was not gambling with Sadie's supply. I ordered the breached walls reinforced, the drone kept on Peter's route, and every water tank sealed. Then Poppy returned to Sadie. That night, the medical wing became quiet enough for people to tell the truth. Poppy showed us 3 sealed nutrient containers in a locked cabinet. They held infected neural tissue and remains from Poppy's childhood friend. He had become a doctor beside her and protected her when the hospital fell. He loved me, Poppy said. I rejected him because research felt safer. He died keeping the infected away from my lab. A loose instrument rolled off the cart toward Poppy's hand. Inside one container, preserved fingers flexed against the glass. The monitor jumped once. Poppy steadied the instrument. Residual neural response. Old nerves can still answer a familiar danger pattern after the person is gone. Then she touched the cabinet door. I learned my answer after he could no longer hear it. No one tried to improve that sentence. In the reinforced bay, Sadie sat beside Inez, while Holly changed the bandages around the fused plating. Sadie asked, "Does it always hurt?" Inez lowered her human face. "Yes, the outer body heals before I do." Sadie looked at the bruises on her own arms. "Mine hurts without healing." I stood close enough to hear them. I stayed out of the conversation. Inez moved one claw between Sadie and the open bay door, protecting her by instinct. Sadie noticed. Then her breathing changed. Poppy caught her before the next collapse reached the floor. Sadie woke in the medical room and asked for the surgery. Poppy warned her plainly. Controlled black gold regeneration may repair your blood-forming cells. It may also trigger mutation, organ failure, or death. Sadie looked at Holly holding Inez's hand through the plating. "I can die waiting," Sadie answered. "Start it." Across the city, a roadside camera later showed Peter following the gravecrawler's tracks near the construction site. He called Holly's name, then Inez's. A wing descendant operative dropped onto the road behind him. Peter turned. The camera cut before either man moved. Back at the lab, I committed to the treatment. Future mechanics had called a related medicine an elixir of immortality. The name was marketing. It treated disease and rebuilt tissue. Nobody became immortal. I had memorized the broad energy ratio and construction protocol because mechanics maintained the future treatment chambers. Poppy and Abram adapted that memory to Sadie's leukemia. We used one controlled dose first. Full black gold exposure remained the last resort. Poppy sealed Sadie inside the clear treatment capsule. Abram locked the measured core into its housing. I set the emergency cutoff and a backup protocol in case the energy surged. Before activation, I sent one calibration pulse through the capsule. The treatment console drew a rough map of nearby black gold concentrations. It marked the stored cores in the workshop, Inez in the vehicle bay, and the measured core beside Sadie. The map ended near the Ridge Road. Poppy could use it to see where a surge was coming from. Sadie placed one hand against the glass. I placed mine against the other side. Then the core lit. We started Sadie's treatment while Peter was still running toward us. The next collision was supposed to be a reunion. The ascendant circle was already moving to poison it. The core inside Sadie's capsule lit while Peter was still running toward us. Future mechanics called the treatment an elixir of immortality. At that moment, it had one sick teenager, 3 warning lights, and 0 immortality. Marketing had survived the apocalypse. At the east construction route, Sadie's drone showed me Peter Rudd sprinting through a pack of rank 1 zombies. The entrails covering his raincoat had fooled ordinary dead. Rank 1 had better senses. Otto and Holly were already in the gravecrawler because the last camera had shown the winged attacker behind him. Sadie's voice came through the vehicle speaker. "Weak! Clear! Dad is 3 blocks east! Otto, left at the crane!" Otto turned right. Holly grabbed the wheel and corrected him. "She said left." "I was testing the navigator," Otto answered. Holly kept one hand on the wheel. "You passed as an airhead." The car goblin had just been roasted by a passenger during a rescue. Beautiful. Then Peter screamed over the drone feed, and every joke died. 2 rank 1 zombies jumped from a loading platform. Their claws tore strips from Peter's raincoat. He dropped the donor notebook, kicked one creature away, and lost his scent cover in the mud. The rest of the pack turned toward him. Otto hit the accelerator. The gravecrawler climbed a concrete divider, landed sideways, and fired its roof laser through the first rank 1 skull. Holly pulled Peter's door open before the vehicle stopped moving. "Peter Rudd!" Holly shouted. "Get in! Sadie sent us!" Peter heard his daughter's name and ran harder. A rank 1 creature caught his ankle. Otto swung the vehicle around. The side spikes ripped the attacker off Peter while the grinder chewed through the next 2 bodies. Holly leaned from the open door, caught Peter's coat, and hauled him across the floor. The last zombie landed on the roof. Otto fired the electric armor. Green current crossed the plating. The creature locked up and rolled beneath the rear tires. Peter lay between the seats, gasping Sadie's name. Holly handed him the donor notebook. "She's alive. She's at Heller Ridge." Peter gripped the notebook against his chest. Between breaths, Peter told Holly what the road camera had missed. The winged operative had struck his shoulder, torn away part of the scent cover, and driven him toward the construction route. Then the attacker stopped when the rank 1 pack arrived. Holly pulled the torn raincoat aside. A hair-thin black line sat under Peter's skin where the claw had entered. It looked like a broken vein. Peter was alive and inside the vehicle. The search was over. The route behind him suggested somebody had shaped the rescue before Otto arrived. Then the drone's rear camera caught 2 people on a distant roof. Crispin Snow stood beside the same winged operative. Black dust clung to one blue feather on the attacker's claw. A thin strand connected it to Crispin's closing hand. The line under Peter's skin pulsed once, and Holly pulled her hand away. Neither man attacked. They watched the gravecrawler leave. I reviewed that frame later. At the time, Otto only knew the road behind him had gone quiet. The footage proved they had shaped the rescue and left something inside Peter. I still did not know what. Minutes later, at Heller Ridge, the gravecrawler crashed through the outer gate and stopped beside the medical wing. Peter ran inside before Otto finished opening the door. He reached the treatment room and saw Sadie inside the clear capsule. Her face looked smaller behind the glass. Black gold light moved through the lines beside her bed. One hand rested against the same place where mine had been. Peter stopped 3 feet away. Peter whispered, "Sadie!" Her eyes opened. Sadie answered, "Dad!" Peter crossed the room and placed both hands against the glass. Sadie lifted hers from inside. Their palms met through the capsule wall. Nobody interrupted them. Peter apologized for leaving. Sadie shook her head. He apologized again because fathers sometimes repeat the sentence they cannot survive hearing themselves say, "once." She asked whether he had found the blood. Peter looked at the sealed treatment lines and finally noticed the core. His relief vanished. "What did you put inside her?" Peter demanded. Poppy stepped between him and the controls. "A measured black gold dose. Sadie chose the treatment before you arrived." Peter looked at me. "You're using the pills." I placed one of the unmarked tablets on the counter. "We found these in your wreck. Tell us who supplied them." Peter's shoulders dropped. "Sal Vickers," he told us. He represented a charity that claimed it could find leukemia donors after the hospitals failed. Sal Vickers was the fake charity contact who had given Peter the black gold pills. Peter said Sal first offered medicine, transport, and access to blood. In exchange, Peter moved sealed boxes through the city and introduced desperate families to the program. Then people began changing after taking the pills. Peter saw one family die. He saw another survivor grow strong enough to tear open a steel door. Sal called both outcomes useful data. Peter kept working anyway. He looked through the capsule at Sadie. "They said the next batch could cure her." Abram's face hardened. "After you knew what the pills did?" Peter nodded once. Then he pulled up his sleeve. "Use my blood. I'm her father. Take whatever she needs." Poppy moved immediately. She drew a sample while Abram checked the capsule response. The monitor accepted the match and Sadie's pulse steadied. Inside the capsule, her fingers tightened against the glass. Peter pressed his hand over them and watched the red warning line drop 1 level. Poppy checked the flowing sample. "Your blood buys time. The risk stays." Peter nodded without looking away. The monitor steadied. Peter watched the black gold light move through the tube connected to his daughter. Then he saw the same green reaction inside the pill on the counter. His face changed. Peter's hand left the glass. Peter ordered, "Stop the treatment." Poppy kept one hand on the controls. Stopping now could kill her. Peter reached for the emergency release. I caught his wrist. "The Circle is planning a city-scale experiment," Peter snapped. "Sal said they would activate everyone at once. We need to take Sadie and leave." "She cannot survive the trip without this capsule," I told him. Peter shoved me. "You don't know what she'll become," held his wrist. "I know what happens if we do nothing." He reached around me for the release again. Sadie had already heard the risks and chosen the controlled dose. Peter arrived after the core was active. He swung at me. I blocked the punch and struck the side of his neck. Peter dropped before his hand touched the control. Holly caught him on the way down. Abram stared at me like he wanted to argue and had no spare seconds. I pointed at the bloodline. "Continue the draw!" Poppy did. When Peter woke, he would remember my hand on his neck before he remembered the reunion. I ordered the draw anyway. A recovered Ascendant recording showed their local cell in the back room of an abandoned bar. Crispin placed my hospital footage on the table. Sal Vickers, the winged operative, Dorian Niles, and Colin Fitch watched. "Recruit the mechanic and the doctor," Crispin ordered. "Kill Jared if he refuses. Keep Abram alive for the future consultant. Separate Jared from the base before the girl stabilizes." Dorian flexed his restored fingers. "And if he fights," Crispin smiled. "He will." The Ascendant Circle sounded like a luxury fitness cult for people who ate radioactive marbles. Then they started moving. Back at Heller Ridge, I locked the massive Chimera core into Titan Frame Mark II's spinal housing. Otto stood at the Gravecrawler defense console, keying the outer launchers to his bloodbound grip. Peter recovered on a medical cot behind us. "You build everything from black gold," Otto said. "Then you keep saying you want it gone." "In my future, settlements needed it for heat, power, and medicine," I told him. Core bosses controlled the supply, so they controlled who ate and who counted as human. Otto locked the first launcher. What's the plan? Use their power to break their control. Then, build a future that does not need it. Otto locked the second launcher and rubbed the scar across his knuckles. I have a son outside the city. I kept telling myself distance made me a better father. Convenient story. Terrible results. Peter tried to stand. His monitor alarm cut through the workshop, and Holly caught his elbow at the doorway. She chose the treatment? Peter asked. She did, I answered. Peter looked toward the medical wing. Then, help me keep mine alive. Otto finished the final defense lock. That appears to be the group project. Titan frame, Mark II sealed over my shoulders. The Chimera core fed stronger flight systems, modular forearm tools, and a deeper shield. When that core emptied, I became a student inside a metal coffin. I killed power to the left forearm and pulled an emergency cable. The mechanical saw snapped out on spring tension. The black gold controls could die. The tools still had pins, cables, and physical triggers. I could work by hand. I reset the saw and closed the panel. Poppy stepped onto the platform and ran 2 fingers along a repaired chest plate. Try bringing this one back with fewer holes, she told me. I looked down at her. You keep asking me to preserve the equipment. I'm starting to think you only like me armored. Poppy smiled. I like competent men. The armor is doing helpful public relations. Then the northern sensor alarm sounded. Otto stared as Mark II's wings unfolded. That thing is a flying divorce from common sense. I told him, it already has a name. Otto spread his hands. Mine was better. Close the helmet. Defend the base. The machine already has a name. I gave Otto command of the outer defenses and the gravecrawler. The doctors stayed with Sadie. Holly remained near Peter. Inez guarded the medical wing from the reinforced bay. The northern alarm had caught an ascendant transmission from the industrial edge. Peter had warned us about a city-wide activation. I had to reach the transmitter before they triggered it. Titan frame. Mark II cleared the ridge. The ascendant circle started both attacks at once. A purple blast struck Heller Ridge's outer barrier behind me. The winged operative hovered beyond the wall and fired again. Otto drove the gravecrawler onto the access road. Roof torpedoes crossed the barrier gap and forced the attacker higher. The side laser chased him away from the medical wing. Go, Otto shouted through comms. I got the ugly bird. Then my signal died. 5 miles north, 3 black gold robots rose from abandoned trucks and locked onto Mark II. Their joints used mechanisms I recognized from decades ahead. That confirmed a future engineer was feeding the circle. The first robot fired a purple beam. I rolled through it, caught the machine by one arm, and drove it through the pavement. Its chest opened before impact and released a magnetic clamp around Mark II's knee. I tore free, but the clamp pulled a full charge from the shield. The second launched cable hooks toward my wings. I cut the cables with the forearm saw and fired a shoulder torpedo into its chest. The explosion exposed cheap welds beneath future-shaped armor. Whoever built these machines understood the design and had rushed the bodies. The third copied my movement and aimed for the spinal housing. Smart target. I let it commit, vented the left booster, and turned its charge into the wreck of the first machine. All 3 went down too easily. Then 6 more stepped from the warehouses. I fired 2 cannons and spent another section of Mark II's core. Metal bodies broke. More replaced them. One machine crawled beneath the wreckage and locked both hands around my ankle. Another fired only after I stopped to remove it. Their timing was competent. Their weapons were disposable. Every exchange made me spend energy while they spent scrap. The robots had future design and cheap construction. Their armor was thin, their attacks repeated. They were dangerous enough to slow me and too weak to finish me. I crushed another head and found no mature core inside. The pattern became obvious. Every cheap robot bought the circle another minute with me away from Heller Ridge. One final packet reached Mark II before the dead comms went black. Heller Ridge's outer barrier was still holding. The medical wing camera had already failed. Something had entered the base without crossing the wall. The outer barrier at Heller Ridge kept the ascendant circle outside. Peter's donated blood let Crispin Snow appear inside. I saw the sequence later on. A backup camera Abram had buried behind the control panels. While I fought beyond communications range, one tube of Peter's blood began glowing beside Sadie's treatment console. Poppy reached for it. The tube burst before her fingers touched the rack. Black gold light spread across the floor in the shape of a man. Crispin stepped out of it with his coat dry and his smile intact. Teleporters were the worst. Walls stopped mattering, and smugness apparently survived every trip. Peter jerked awake on the medical cot. A matching black line climbed from the wound on Peter's shoulder. It crossed his chest and reached his throat. His heart monitor screamed. The line matched the black thread the drone had caught between the winged operative's feather and Crispin's hand. Crispin had planted a blood substitution mark through the strike. Peter's donated sample carried it into the treatment rack and gave Crispin one manifestation. Peter paid the cost. Peter tried to stand. His first step went toward Sadie's room. Crispin touched the mark. Peter collapsed with black veins spreading beneath his skin. He clawed at the floor and kept saying Sadie's name while the infection moved faster than any bite I had seen. Poppy sprayed anesthetic through the control room vent. Crispin watched the white cloud reach him, vanished, and let one of his black gold substitutes take the dose. The decoy hit the floor coughing while the real man appeared beside Peter. Crispin crouched over him. "One mark, one doorway, you were useful exactly once." Peter grabbed Crispin's ankle. The teleporter kicked free and left him shaking beside the broken blood rack. Abram raised a compact energy pistol. "Get away from him." Crispin vanished before Abram fired. The shot hit an empty console. He reappeared behind the control room glass and locked the blast door between himself and Abram. The exterior cameras showed Sal Vickers' squad waiting beyond the barrier. Crispin had made the wall irrelevant by using a father's blood sample. He moved toward the medical wing. At the outer gate, the winged operative hit Otto with enough blue energy to flip the gravecrawler. Otto told me the vehicle rolled twice. The roof tore through the access road. The core collector emptied across the mud, and the car goblin mourned every lost pearl while hanging upside down. Then the attacker landed beside the wreck. Otto released his harness and dropped onto the ceiling. He kicked out the warped driver's door, tore it free, and used it as a shield when the next blast arrived. Blue energy folded the steel around his arm. Otto fired the compact pistol from behind the door. The winged man twisted sideways before the bullet left the barrel. Otto fired again at the left wing. The attacker folded it early, let the round pass, and answered with a low sweep aimed at Otto's injured knee. Otto blocked with the door, but the impact drove him into the gravecrawler's exposed axle. The attacker aimed for Otto's old knee and anticipated the pistol after a vehicle roll. He even moved during the exact pause before Otto lied about being fine. That move stopped Otto colder than the blast. The attacker always shifted his right shoulder first. He had used the same fake step during their last failed heist. Otto threw the door aside and drew his blood-bound blade. Otto ordered, "Show your face!" The winged body folded inward. Feathers and blue growths pulled beneath human skin. A broad man with a blue beard and an old scar across one eyebrow stood in the road. Otto recognized one of the men from his old crew. "Hank Deller," Otto said. Hank was the former crewmate from Otto's poison memory. He had disappeared after the wrong exit, the broken signal, and the last job that split everyone apart. Hank looked at the overturned gravecrawler. "You still ruin every vehicle you touch." Otto raised the bent door. "You still lose fights to them." One brutal old brother insult. Then Hank attacked for real. He crossed the road fast enough to dent the door into Otto's chest. Otto rolled with the impact, fired under the steel, and forced Hank back into his winged form. Hank climbed over the next shot and drove both feet into the door. The steel panel folded around Otto like a bad suit. Otto dropped it, slid beneath the gravecrawler, and cut one blue feather from Hank's ankle with the blood-bound blade. Hank's tail swept Otto's legs. Otto hit the mud, lost the pistol, and kept the blade. A roof torpedo still hung crooked in the overturned launcher. Otto slapped the manual release. The torpedo fired sideways, missed Hank, and blew a crater between him and the medical wing. Terrible aim, excellent boundary. Hank had to go through Otto again. In the treatment room, Crispin found Sadie's capsule already climbing past the controlled range. Poppy reached the manual panel from the other side of the blast door. Abram worked on the lock while Peter shook on the floor behind them. Crispin looked through the glass at Peter. "Your father is becoming infected. That is the price of opening a door for me." Poppy slammed both palms against the glass. "You marked him before he donated." Crispin tapped the capsule. He brought the mark to the machine. "Very cooperative family." Sadie's pulse jumped. Crispin switched the treatment from measured regeneration to uncontrolled ability activation. The capsule's green lines turned purple and began feeding every stored charge into her at once. The concentration map I had calibrated around Heller Ridge blew past its old range. Its edge expanded across the city grid as distant cores lit one after another. Crispin's overload had given the capsule far more reach than I designed. The emergency cutoff flashed red. Crispin had locked it behind the control room system. Abram's first bypass opened one valve and closed two others. Sadie's pulse climbed anyway. Poppy struck the glass with the antidote vial she had used on Otto. The surge was pure energy. Her antidotes had nothing to target. Poppy shouted, "Sadie, stay awake, look at me." Sadie's eyes opened, but her hand could not reach the glass. Crispin opened the stabilizer compartment and wrapped one hand around the emergency vial. "She survives the activation, she will need this," he told Poppy. "People become loyal very quickly when you own the only thing keeping their body together." He pointed at Sadie. "Jared built the chamber. He filled it with black gold. He made the experiment. We are simply offering the result a future." Abram's cutting tool bit through the blast door hinge. Sparks filled the corridor. Crispin sent a substitute through the half-open gap. Abram shot it at arm's length, and the decoy burst into black dust across his robe. The self-appointed professor did not even look down. He kept cutting. Poppy answered Crispin through the glass. Save the speech, you poisoned a child and need somebody else to blame. Crispin's smile thinned. He increased the flow. Sadie's back arched inside the capsule. The black gold core in the housing cracked its restraint ring. One more surge would turn a controlled treatment into the exact forced mutation Peter had feared. Miles away, the final robot wave opened around something alive. The machines withdrew into a circle. A psychic beast walked between them on 6 narrow limbs. Its body was covered in eyes. Purple fire burned inside the largest pair. Titan frame, Mark II, targeted the core housing beneath its chest. Then, every eye opened. My arms slowed inside the controls. The frame still moved. My perception reached each movement late, as though the beast had inserted a second between thought and action. It fired purple flame. I raised the shield after the blast hit. Mark II crossed the highway, tore through a concrete divider, and lost another section of its core. The beast rushed while my balance lagged. One claw opened the shoulder plate. Another hooked the spinal housing. I fired the chest cannon without aiming. The blast hit one of the surrounding robots and showered the highway with metal. The beast used the flash to close another 10 feet. I cut the hooked limb with the forearm saw, but the beast had already seen the swing. 3 eyes tracked the blade. Its body shifted before contact and drove me backward. Purple flame entered the open shoulder plate. Heat alarms climbed across my faceplate. I dumped coolant through the joint, turned the steam into cover, and still felt the slowing pressure searching for my eyes. The slowing effect strengthened whenever I looked directly at the eyes, so I stopped looking at them. I switched the faceplate to heat outlines. The beast became 6 hot limbs around one colder housing. Mark II's computer still tried to label every eye. I ripped the targeting lead from the panel and flew on the crude outline instead. My first blind punch missed. My follow-up caught a knee. The beast staggered, so I fired 2 torpedoes at the pavement beside its left legs. The explosion rolled the beast. I boosted through the smoke and drove Mark II's fist into the exposed housing. Purple fire burst from the wound. The creature crashed onto its side. The robot stopped moving. For 1 second, I thought the test was over. A white-haired woman landed on Mark II's raised arm. She wore a pale coat with no armor. The frame was hot enough to warp paint, and she did not flinch. I fired the arm cannon. She disappeared before the charge finished. Of course she teleported too. Future enemies had apparently declared walking obsolete. The woman reappeared on Mark II's shoulder and placed one hand against the black gold housing. Every light inside my frame went dark. The boosters died. My shield vanished. Both controls locked around my hands. Black gold energy left the machine in bright threads and gathered around her fingers. My apex armor had become dead weight in one touch. Back at the outer gate, Hank offered Otto the reason to betray us. He hovered above the overturned gravecrawler with one wing damaged by Otto's pistol. Kirk and Faye are alive, Hank told him. The circle restored us. We stopped hiding from police, and the broken bodies are gone. Otto tightened his grip on the blade. You saw them? I fought beside them. Hank named the false call sign from their final job. He named the service tunnel Otto had missed and the van Faye had stolen after the crew scattered. Those details belonged to somebody who had been there, or somebody who had heard the story from them. Otto's blade lowered 1 inch. Otto asked, Kirk? Hank answered, alive. Otto asked, Faye? Hank's mouth twisted. Alive, and still furious with you. Kirk, Dune, and Faye. Dune had been the family Otto thought he had lost after the failed heist. Hank lowered one hand. Come with me. We can put the crew back together. Bring the mechanic if he agrees. Leave the rest. Otto looked past him toward the medical wing. The barrier flashed under another exterior blast. Peter's monitor alarm carried through the base speaker. Sadie's capsule warning followed it. The people inside the lab were already calling for Otto. He charged. Hank's tail whipped toward his throat. Otto caught it against the bent car door, pinned it, and cut through the end with the blood-bound blade. Hank screamed and struck Otto across the road. Otto hit the gravecrawler's overturned wheel, pushed himself upright, and aimed the pistol again. Kirk and Faye can tell me themselves, Otto told him. Until then, you are the man attacking my people. Hank shifted back to human form and clutched the cut tail. Hank stared at Otto. You chose them? Otto spat mud. I chose the people who showed up. He fired. The bullet crossed Hank's cheek. Hank launched into the storm and retreated beyond the barrier before Otto could take a second shot. Hank fled. Otto turned back toward the people calling for him. Miles away, the psychic beast's largest eye opened again beneath Mark II. The white-haired controller stood on my dead armor with every strand of black gold energy answering her instead of me. I forced one mechanical lock open by hand. The white-haired controller looked down and smiled. You built impressive toys, Jared Solis. Then she pulled the remaining energy out of the frame. Inside Hella Ridge's service corridor, a surviving camera caught Dorian Niles raising both hands toward Holly Pruitt. The restored fire user had reached the medical wing, while Crispin controlled the treatment room. In that corridor, Holly and her fused sister were the only bodies between him and Sadie's capsule. Dorian fired. Inez came through the wall first. Her plated body smashed the fire user across the corridor and covered Holly with two hooked limbs. Flames rolled over Inez's back. The outer shell blackened. She kept Holly underneath it. Holly pressed both hands against her sister's human face. Inez, move! You're burning! Inez opened one damaged eye. He was aiming at you. The woman everyone had called a monster used the monster body as a shield. Dorian pushed himself out of the broken wall. Fire gathered around his arms again. Holly rolled beneath Inez's chest and pulled the emergency sprinkler lever. Water hit the flames and filled the corridor with steam. Dorian burned through the first pipe, but the delay let Inez hook his waist and drive him into the ceiling. He blasted free and opened another crack across her shell. Inez stayed between him and Holly. Every second she held the fire user there kept one more enemy out of the treatment room. Then Inez turned the largest eye in her fused body towards Sadie's capsule. One wall away, inside the treatment room, Poppy saw the purple surge weaken. Poppy shouted through the corridor speaker, "Inez can suppress black gold! Hold that eye on the core!" The poison princess slammed the backup switch I had installed before leaving. The main feed kept running, but every emergency drain around the capsule opened. Abram ripped the last hinge from the blast door and reached the manual controls. Crispin sent a substitute through the gap. Poppy broke an anesthetic ampoule across the decoy's face. The substitute collapsed long enough for Abram to reach the panel. Sadie's pulse stopped climbing. Crispin reached through the broken controls for the emergency stabilizer vial. Poppy caught his wrist. He substituted out of her grip and appeared beside the exit. Abram fired through the space Crispin needed next. The teleporter had entered through blood. Now the professor's gun blocked one exit and Poppy held the other. Back in the service corridor, Colin Fitch entered through the breach. Colin was the former classmate Delaney had shoved toward Aaron on the first morning. Later, he hit a core, swallowed it, and turned white. Blue energy ran along his right arm. He saw Inez suppressing the capsule and attacked the eye first. A blue slash crossed the corridor. Inez twisted over Holly. The energy cut through the plating beside her human shoulder and knocked both sisters into the treatment room wall. The suppression eye closed. Inside the treatment room, Sadie's capsule surged brighter than before. Holly grabbed a broken support bar and struck Colin across the wrist. He barely moved. Colin caught the bar, pulled her forward, and raised his glowing hand. Inez slammed one claw between them before the strike landed. Dorian's next blast forced Holly back beside her sister. Colin used the opening to cross the broken doorway and cut the first drain line. Purple light poured across the treatment room floor. The first stable drain died. The remaining lines jumped from green to purple. Colin stepped over the spill and aimed his next slash at the backup panel. Abrams sealed the rupture with his bare palm and a metal plate while Poppy kept Crispin away from the stabilizer. Sadie's capsule kept brightening. 5 miles north, on the highway, the psychic beast rose beneath my disabled armor. The white-haired controller had drained Mark II's black gold systems. The creature's slowing eyes reopened because my first barrage had only broken its housing cover. I had one dead frame, one live beast, and a woman standing on my shoulder like she had bought the machine. She teleported from the armor to the highway. Of course she did. Future royalty apparently considered walking a design flaw. The beast lunged. I tore open the manual panel and grabbed the same emergency cable I had tested before launch. The black gold controls were dead. The physical releases still worked. I pulled the pins from 2 shoulder torpedoes and kicked them free. The beast caught one in its mouth. I struck the manual ignition. The blast tore open the largest cluster of eyes and rolled the creature across the road. The second torpedo skipped beneath its chest and exploded against the cold housing my heat display had found. The slowing pressure broke for half a breath. I yanked the right arm release and hammered the beast before its remaining eyes reopened. Purple fire swept beneath Mark II and melted the left knee joint. I dropped the frame onto one side, released the harness, and fired the forearm blowtorch into the exposed housing. Heat climbed through the harness and numbed my left foot. The beast dragged the dead frame across the road while the torch kept burning into its chest. Then it screamed and drove one claw through the chest plate. I trapped the limb against the frame and started the mechanical saw by hand. The blade cut halfway through the core housing and jammed. 3 surviving eyes opened above me. Each look slowed my hands, so I stopped watching the blade and pulled by the vibration in the cable. I put both feet against the panel and pulled. The housing split. Purple fire died inside the beast. Its body hit the highway and stayed down. I had killed the circle's test animal after its controller killed my power system. The white-haired woman clapped once. Then she lifted one finger and pulled the loose black gold from the corpse. Bright threads crossed the road and gathered around her hand. Mark II's remaining core answered the same command. I climbed out before the armor sealed around me. The controller finally gave me her name. Althea Heller, Abram Heller's granddaughter. The surname hit harder than the beast. At her feet, every loose strand of black gold turned away from my armor and pointed toward her. Althea said she came from roughly 100 years ahead. In her century, researchers rebuilt the transfer design that had sent me back. Their version could send another consciousness to the same outbreak anchor. She had returned to day 1. The Ascendant Circle called her the Great Sage because she carried a century of mutation science. I stepped away from the dead frame. Your grandfather is inside the base your people are attacking. Althea's expression did not move. That is why he will be taken alive. She held Mark II frozen, while one emergency channel carried our voices back to Heller Ridge. Then Althea told me what followed: black gold through space. The first meteor seeded the virus and black gold, she said. Every core still carries its signal. Black gold fragments rose from the robot Rex and circled her fingers. A second meteor is following that signal. It reaches Earth in about a century, and it is 10,000 times larger. She flicked 2 fragments at my face. I blocked with Mark II's dead forearm plate and watched both pieces punch through the metal. I looked past her, a Havenport burning beneath the storm. So you started the slaughter early. Ordinary human bodies cannot survive the second impact, Althea answered. I charged. She pulled the fragments into a shield. My fist stopped inches from her face. Althea drove the same material through my chest plate and threw me against Mark II. The impact killed the emergency channel. I accelerated evolution, she said. Ability users. Regenerative bodies. Psychic beasts. I pushed myself up while broken robots moved around her. Every failed transformation gives us data, Althea continued. Every stable ability user moves the species closer. Waiting produces extinction. Behind her, the city burned with people she had used as test subjects. I charged again. At Heller Ridge, Crispin used Althea's surname against Abram. The treatment room camera showed him beside Sadie's glowing capsule, while the doctor and professor held opposite sides of the broken controls. Althea Heller is your granddaughter, Crispin told Abram. After a childhood injury, she continued your research. A century later, she became the great sage who controls black gold. Abram stared through the broken blast door. Crispin pointed toward the capsule. She wants the researcher and the doctor alive. Finish everyone else! That was when Peter moved behind Poppy. The black line from Crispin's mark had reached Peter's eyes. His body rose from the floor with the stiff hunger of the infected. His fingertips scraped Sadie's capsule once before he turned toward Poppy. Sadie floated inches away behind the glass and never saw him. Poppy heard his hand strike her locked cabinet. Peter! He lunged. Abram pulled Poppy aside. Peter hit the treatment console and cracked the outer panel. A separate container fell from the cabinet. Inside the nutrient gel, the preserved arm from Poppy's dead protector flexed. It was the same residual response its monitor had shown before treatment. The container rolled between Poppy and Dorian's next blast. Thick glass took the fire and shattered across the floor. Poppy stared at the broken container for 1 beat. Then she grabbed the backup switch and kept working. Back in the service corridor, Colin struck Inez again. The second blue slash opened the fused shell. Holly dragged her sister away from the capsule while Dorian closed in. 1 wall away, Poppy reached through the cracked console and held the backup switch down by hand. Sadie's body lifted inside the capsule. Black gold light gathered behind her shoulders. On the highway, Althea offered me a place beside her. You build what this era cannot imagine, she said. I control the energy your machines require. Join me. We can guide the evolved population instead of letting frightened survivors waste the century. There it was. She wanted a species that needed her permission to live. I pushed myself off the wrecked frame. That is a queen fantasy with a body count. Althea's eyes hardened. I kept going. You poisoned cities, forced mutations, and turned humanity into property. The meteor will not care about your morality, Althea answered. Neither did the first horde. We still fought it as humans. I tore the damaged core housing from Mark II's spine. Althea reached for the energy inside it. I crushed the regulator before she could take clean control. The core surged through every broken circuit. Mark II's right arm moved for one final strike. I drove the fist toward her. Althea caught the current halfway and forced the arm backward. Metal folded around my shoulder. She drained the surge into 3 robot wrecks and sent the broken machines at me on black gold threads. I used Mark II's collapsing arm as a club. The first robot broke against the second. The third pinned my leg long enough for Althea to take the last stable charge from the spinal housing. Pain dropped me to 1 knee. She stood over me. You would destroy the only power capable of saving the species. I would destroy anyone who makes people beg for permission to survive. Triggered the last booster manually. The blast threw both of us across the highway. Althea landed standing. I hit the road beside the dead beast with one arm numb. Mark II burned out behind me. The emergency channel from Heller Ridge opened for half a second. Poppy's voice broke through the static. Jared, the capsule is draining everything around it. Then the signal died. Inside the treatment room, Poppy held the backup switch while Inez reopened her suppression eye from the corridor. The purple flow reversed. Sadie began pulling black gold inward. On the treatment console, the city-wide concentration map Crispin had forced open narrowed around one signal. Every smaller point dimmed until the largest concentration burned alone on the highway. Althea! Sadie opened her eyes. Energy spread from her shoulders in two butterfly-shaped wings. The capsule cracked outward. Poppy later said, Sadie looked first at Peter's infected body, then at Inez shielding Holly. Her last look went toward the dead emergency channel. Then she followed the strongest black gold signal to me. A bright line crossed the sky above Havenport. Sadie landed between Althea and me. 50 years earlier, a room full of people had shut a door and left me outside. Sadie crossed the city when my own power failed. Althea raised one hand. You belong to the circle now. Sadie looked at her. I don't belong to anybody. Althea tried to seize the energy in Sadie's wings. The current reversed. Black gold light tore out of Althea's hands, chest, and eyes. Every thread flowed into Sadie. Althea finally looked afraid. She closed her fist around the current, but nothing answered. Sadie lifted one hand. The last of Althea's black gold left her body. Althea fell beside Mark II. I reached for Sadie. She turned, and I saw how pale she still was beneath the light. The power can strip black gold from zombies and ability users, Sadie told me. It can take all of it. I looked at the wings. Then we take you back. Poppy can stabilize the rest. Sadie shook her head. My blood is still failing. Absorption changed what I can take. The leukemia is still killing me. I stepped closer. We find another treatment. When I absorbed Althea's energy, I felt the paths black gold touched, Sadie said. The energy showed me where it had been. I saw enough of your future to understand why you came back. Sadie looked toward the city. My dad taught me that kindness is a choice. You taught me to check the exit before I choose. The wings brightened. Althea said the second meteor follows the black gold signal. If I absorb every core on Earth, I can carry that signal away from the planet. I grabbed her wrist. Sadie's skin was cold. I asked, can you reach it? I don't know, she answered. Staying ends with the meteor coming here and my body failing. Energy gathered around her feet. Sadie looked at my hand around her wrist. Let me choose. My grip loosened for 1 second. That was enough. Sadie pulled every nearby thread of black gold into her wings. Light closed around her body. She rose above the highway. I'll take the black gold away from Earth, she said. Then I'll draw the meteor after me. I jumped and reached for her. My fingers closed on light. Sadie vanished. I shouted, Sadie!